A dark-haired young man pauses in the rain, his gaze falling upon a tiny, hooded girl huddled miserably in an alley. Staring down at her, the man reflects that meeting this frail girl would ultimately alter the course of his entire fate. Slashing with immense power, the swordsman fiercely battles a monstrous avian creature. The defeated beast leaves behind a glowing gem, which the weary adventurer collects before continuing down the cavernous dungeon corridor. Ancient legends claim that these sprawling, ruined dungeons hold absolutely everything in this world. These mysterious structures are said to have been forged by heavenly gods, leaving adventurers to battle endless swarms of spawned monsters. Plunging his blade into a massive serpent, the swordsman gathers vital resources from these dangerous labyrinths scattered across the world. Because adventurers risk their lives daily for precious demon or bustling settlements like Roria's City were built directly beside these lucrative dungeons. Inside the busy Roria's City Adventurers Guild, a dark-skinned receptionist nervously attempts to handle the demanding crowd. A gruff adventurer aggressively leans over the counter, pressuring the overwhelmed receptionist to arrange party members despite her protests. Ignoring her frantic reminders about the line of waiting people, the desperate man demands a strong frontliner for his party. Annoyed by the commotion, the dark-haired swordsman steps up and silently glares at the loudmouth blocking the counter. Visibly intimidated by the newcomer's cold stare, the boisterous man quickly backs down and retreats from the desk. Muttering under his breath about not wanting to team up with someone like that anyway, the swordsman calmly hands the startled receptionist his bag of demon ore to cash in. As the organization oversees Roria's City's dungeons, nearby veterans quietly gossip that no one would ever pick a lone wolf like him. Unlike him, most successful adventurers actively form diverse parties to explore safely and supplement each other's unique strengths. Apologizing for the wait, the receptionist returns to the counter and presents him with his daily pay and a detailed breakdown of his earnings. Looking at the large sum, she hesitantly asks if he needs to split the sizable reward with the rest of his party. He bluntly asks if he looks like he has company, causing the embarrassed receptionist to frantically apologize for her assumption. Accepting his solitary payment, the swordsman turns his back to the bustling counter and silently walks toward the guild's exit. The crowd of waiting adventurers completely parts for him, watching in hushed awe as the formidable warrior strolls past. Excited whispers ripple through the hall as they recognize him as the legendary blazing swordsman, wishing someone that powerful would join their ranks. Assuming a skilled veteran like him already has his absolute pick of elite parties, they merely watch as he exits into the gloomy streets. Strolling through the vibrant marketplace, he casually tosses a few coins to a cheerful vendor in exchange for some fresh supplies. Walking alone, he cynically reflects that everyone in this city is just looking to use him for a massive score on the dangerous deep floors. Feeling the first drops of an impending storm, he decides to head back to his place early and enjoy a quiet drink alone. Brushing off the lingering thoughts of needy comrades, he mutters that none of those party politics concern him anymore. His solitary walk comes to a sudden halt as he spots the frail figure in the alley, his heart heavy with the reminder that he no longer has any comrades left. Shivering against the cold brick wall, the tiny, destitute girl sits completely alone with nothing but a simple staff resting beside her. Beneath the shadow of her wet hood, her exhausted, hollow eyes stare blankly ahead, silently begging for a salvation she never expects to come. The veteran swordsman pauses in the muddy street, wondering what a young girl is doing out in the freezing rain. Reasoning that homeless orphans are not rare these days, he suspects she might be a thief hiding something dangerous under her heavy robe. Deciding it is best not to get involved, he turns his back and continues walking away down the dreary alley. He abruptly stops in his tracks, guilt washing over him as he considers just how tiny and vulnerable she is. Frowning into the downpour, he admits he would feel completely awful if he later heard a kid collapsed and died in the street. Yielding to his conscience, he turns back around to approach her huddled form and calls out to get her attention. The fragile girl flinches in surprise, looking up at him with wide, exhausted eyes as he addresses her. Staring down with a flat expression, the scarred adventurer bluntly asks her what she thinks she is doing. Spotting her staff and realizing her robe isn't normal town wear, he correctly deduces she must be a fellow adventurer. He initially dismisses her since most adventurers aren't memorable, but suddenly realizes he has definitely seen her at the guild before. Scratching his head in thought, he decides that she at least doesn't seem hostile for the time being. Regardless of whatever terrible situation she is in, he firmly tells her she doesn't have to sit out here in the storm. Reaching out, he gently places his large hand on her soaked hood and remarks that she looks like a drowned rat. Sighing heavily to himself, he questions why he is even bothering to help someone today of all days. The small girl remains completely silent, staring up at him in utter disbelief. She continues to stare blankly at the towering swordsman as the heavy rain pours down around them. He awkwardly hands her a glass bottle to drink and cheer up, immediately regretting it as he wonders if he just gave her false hope. Advising her to find somewhere with a proper roof, he bids her farewell and plans to slip away before he gets bothered any further. Suddenly, the desperate girl lunges forward and wraps her small arms tightly around his waist to stop him from leaving. Clinging desperately to his heavy coat, she tearfully begs him not to leave her all alone in the alley. The exhausted swordsman lets out a long, defeated sigh as he realizes he cannot abandon her now. Trudging toward his home through the storm, he grumbles that running into weird people is a terrible way to end the day. The girl timidly steps inside the warm house, clutching her staff and looking around the grand foyer in awe. Removing his wet gear, he casually welcomes her to his place and tells her not to be shy. Tending to the fireplace, he asks for her name, and the shivering girl nervously introduces herself as Millie. Millie stammers a lie about resting after getting tired in the dungeon, which he immediately sees right through. Slumping onto his sofa to dry his hair, he coldly states he isn't going to pry because he doesn't actually care to know about her. She indignantly demands he show a little interest, but he simply cuts her off and orders her to take a bath so she doesn't catch a cold. Shocked by the incredible luxury, Millie stammers at the prospect of a hot bath while he points her down the hall. Blushing and clutching her towel tightly, Millie silently stares at her unexpected savior with newfound gratitude. Marveling at her new surroundings, the small girl assumes her savior must be a rich and important person to live in such a big house with a bath. Scrubbing her soapy hair, she tearfully recalls how he claimed to have seen her at the guild earlier. A painful memory flashes in her mind, echoing the harsh voices of her former party declaring they no longer needed her. She remembers being ruthlessly kicked out and called a brat, with her former comrades commanding her not to start crying. Overwhelmed by the painful memories, she sinks deeper into the warm bathwater to hide her flushed face. She wonders why someone like him would ever speak to a shabby girl, recalling his blunt remark that she looked like a drowned rat in the rain. Peeking out from the water, her eyes harden with newfound resolve as she vows to do better this time for sure. Gazing up at the stonework, she desperately promises herself that she has to make sure she doesn't get abandoned again. Later, Kodo turns around in sheer confusion, asking the girl to repeat what she just said. Startled by her sudden plea to live in his house, Kodo questions where that came from and wonders if she just really likes the bath since commoners rarely get them. He points out that she should probably be more scared of this situation, but she firmly denies it, leaving him baffled. Kodo explains that the rundown mansion was sold off cheap due to ghost rumors, prompting the girl to bizarrely ask if the ghosts are cute. Frustrated by her lack of fear regarding the ghosts, he urges her to at least be somewhat scared of her current precarious situation. He spells out the danger directly, reminding her that she is a girl staying in a house where a grown man lives completely alone. Staring back with absolute innocence, she simply tilts her head and asks what that has to do with anything. Suddenly grasping his implication, her face flushes bright red as she cries out in shock. Calling him a perv, she yells at Kodo while he dryly reminds her that she was the one who asked to live with him and clarifies he has no inappropriate intentions. Sighing, Kodo states he only brought her in to escape the rain and didn't pick her up as a teammate, though she excitedly declares they will now live together as comrades. Conceding defeat, he tells her to do as she likes, and she quickly secures permission to sleep in the cozy room. Settling into a chair by the warm fireplace, Kodo remarks that the rain can chill a person even during the spring. Glancing over to find her asleep in the corner, he listens quietly as she mutters a desperate plea in her sleep to join his party and promises to do her best. Crouching beside her, Kodo watches the sleeping girl groan softly as tears prick her eyes. His expression softens into one of quiet empathy as he studies her troubled face. He knows it is a common story in this adventurer town for useless or unskilled people to get kicked out of parties, with no need to explain the dark fate that awaits those who lose their place. Staring down at her, he silently admits to himself that talking to this abandoned girl was nothing more than a sudden whim. Morning breaks outside the mansion, and Koto yawns widely while noticing that the heavy rain has finally stopped. Walking out of his room, he grumbles about the noisy morning just as a loud crash and someone shouting his name echo through the halls. He spots the girl precariously balancing on a bookshelf with a rag, and when he asks what she is doing, she cheerfully replies that she is cleaning. Slipping from her perch, she screams for help while Kodo exasperatedly notes that she is cleaning a room he doesn't even use. Catching her mid-fall as she shrieks, Kodo scolds her not to go overboard just because he allowed her to make the mansion her shelter. Millie cheerfully offers her services as a party member and starts cleaning, prompting Kodo to bewilderedly ask why she's doing that. The dark-haired swordsman bluntly refuses her excited declaration that they will explore dungeons together. He coldly explains that he's a solo adventurer who makes enough to survive on his own and simply doesn't need comrades. Ignoring her desperate, pleading eyes, he firmly states that he won't form a party with her regardless of her circumstances. Relenting slightly, he feeds the starving girl, watching in disbelief as she happily devours the meal after wandering alone for 5 days. Kodo sits quietly at the sunny inn table, watching Millie gratefully clasp her hands before diving into the hearty breakfast sandwiches. Watching her eat, he quietly reflects that it has been a long time since he shared a meal with someone. He recalls the fateful day they met, noting that neither of them could have predicted the events that would unfold from that bustling campsite encounter. In a flashback, the camp crowd murmurs in awe as a radiant, white-clad saintess walks through the dungeon grounds. Kodo smiles gently at the popular saintess of the north, warmly telling her that she can stand on her own now. Blushing deeply, the saintess firmly rejects his suggestion and insists she will stay by her master's side forever. A narrator notes that the little mouse-like runt who had such immense power is starting to become one with her master as they walk toward the massive dungeon gates. Transitioning to another memory, a stern adventurer throws a piece of paper at Millie's feet and bluntly tells her they don't need her anymore. Millie stares up in sheer, wide-eyed confusion at the sudden, heart-wrenching rejection. The party leader coldly orders her to take her contract and leave, revealing they are replacing her with a top-notch swordsman. Tears welling in her eyes, Millie desperately asks if she did something wrong to hold everyone back. A callous party member named Ordum glares down at her and cruelly declares that her very existence is an eyesore. Desperately grabbing his jacket, Millie begs to stay and promises to work super hard, only to be violently shoved away and called a deadweight. A bespectacled party member named Wiki sadly hands the devastated Millie a small pouch of coins as a parting gift. Ordum immediately snaps at Wiki, angrily arguing that they shouldn't waste any money giving the useless healer a parting gift. Turning his back completely, Ordum coldly orders the crying brat to beat it. Millie stares at window of the new series as a restless inner monologue begins. Staring out the inn window, Millie's expression darkens as the cruel memory of being called an eyesore echoes through her mind once again. Scrambling to her feet, she desperately begs to be taken to the dungeon, but Kodo firmly rejects her and leaves her behind at the inn. Gripping her staff with fierce determination, Millie vows that she can't just sit around and must do whatever it takes to make Kodo accept her as a teammate. Meanwhile, Kodo arrives back at the bustling Adventurers Guild and approaches the busy reception desks. The cheerful, buxom receptionist happily greets Kodo by name, waving him over to her counter to handle his daily registration. Handing over his paperwork, Kodo grumbles about her being too loud, prompting her to brightly reply that she prefers to be called cheerful. She teasingly explains that her lively welcome is necessary because Kodo's naturally intimidating presence tends to scare the guild's newbies. Brushing off her teasing, Kodo hands over his black rank badge and contract fee to officially take on his next dangerous solo request. The guild receptionist suggests Kodo take higher rank jobs, but he complains that a higher rank just means the hassle of forming a party. She stares at him in confusion, asking if he isn't already with someone today. Kodo flatly denies knowing her, while a tiny, familiar figure peeks out from behind the counter with a squeak. Stepping out confidently, the little girl enthusiastically introduces herself as Millie, a healer who is going to team up with Kodo. Beaming with pride, Millie loudly declares that the longtime solo adventurer finally chose to add her to his party at 10 o'clock today. Dragging the flailing girl away by her hood, Kodo tells the receptionist not to take her seriously because a party is definitely not happening. Marching her outside, Kodo reminds the pouting girl that he refuses to take her into the dungeon, telling her she can stay at his place instead. He sighs that she isn't listening, pointing out that even if she is a registered adventurer, she is still just a kid. Puffing out her chest, Millie insists she is a grown-up who decided to follow him on her own accord. Before he can argue her grown-up status, her eyes sparkle as she gets distracted by a shop's sales time, asking if they have that popular item yet. She darts over to the Adventurers Guild shop, excitedly pointing out their famous baked snacks. Giving in to her enthusiasm over the delicious smell, Kodo agrees to buy some and asks her which ones they should get. Later, they arrive at the Roria city dungeon, which resembles a cave ruin spreading downward underground, making Millie nervous while Kodo remarks that the entrance is too easy. The guild manages the entrance and exit with outposts on the upper floors, but the deeper you go, the less anyone can keep watch over the unknown realm. Although the spawned monsters become increasingly dangerous the deeper you travel, the materials and demon ore obtained are worth far more. Deep inside the rocky caverns, Kodo effortlessly dodges falling debris from a roaring monster. Taking a drink while reviewing his map, he notes that he has a handle on the monsters in this area and decides the safer route is this way. He reminds himself to stay alert because monsters keep spawning from the dungeon's swirling miasma, meaning they will just reappear even after being defeated. He acknowledges that splitting the workload with a party would be easier, but immediately dismisses the idea as not happening. Resolving to just grab the ore and head back, he prepares to finish his solo run. Suddenly, a massive stone golem emerges from the ruins, prompting Kodo to prepare for one more fight deeper in. Before he can draw his blade, Kodo stops and stares silently as someone else approaches the beast. A party of fully armed adventurers rushes past him with incredible speed to engage the golem. A fierce female knight charges forward, drawing her heavy sword to strike the rocky monster. With a devastating blow, she smashes the stone beast to pieces while her party members watch. The other adventurers praise her incredible strength, noting she is even better than the rumors and that they barely had a chance to jump in. The beautiful blonde knight calmly accepts the praise as her party member addresses her as Itsuka-sama, confirming she is the renowned blazing swordsman. Ordam agrees with her prowess, mentioning that at this rate, they will hit their target floor soon. Watching from the shadows, Kodo's eyes narrow as he recognizes that familiar face. A flashback reveals a smug man stating they didn't need a soft formation with a kid healer to push deeper, preferring to just crush everything with an opening strike. Walking away from the dungeon, a group of victorious adventurers excitedly discusses their earnings and challenges their new teammate Itsuka-sama to hold her liquor. The rugged party continues their trek across the cracked terrain, eager to celebrate their successful haul, completely unaware of the events unfolding back in the city. Meanwhile, the long-haired healer Itsuka walks silently alongside them, her expression clouded with unspoken thoughts. She suddenly pauses in her tracks, her attention inexplicably drawn away from the boisterous celebration of her party. Standing near the guild, Kodo spots the group of adventurers in the distance and realizes they are the very party that heartlessly abandoned the little girl. Inside the guild hall, the bustling receptionist Nico playfully scolds Kodo for treating her counter like a daycare, prompting him to apologize while a deeply offended Millie pouts angrily nearby. Millie boldly declares that she interrogated Nico about his intimidating silent lone wolf rumors, leaving Kodo to glare exasperatedly at the receptionist for filling the kid's head with such wild tales. Refusing to be left behind, the little healer furiously insists that she can be useful to him, screaming that she doesn't care how terrifying his reputation might be. Kodo mercilessly shuts her down by dropping a massive sack of demon ore onto the counter, coldly explaining that a solo adventurer relying on stamina potions has absolutely no need for a weak healer. As Nico cheerfully offers to process the massive haul, the sheer size of the loot draws shocked stares from the surrounding adventurers. An envious adventurer immediately accuses Kodo of shaking down other parties for their loot, claiming it is impossible to gather a full bag of demon ore alone. The hostile crowd begins to murmur in agreement, convinced that a solitary fighter couldn't possibly achieve such wealth legitimately. Pointing an accusing finger, the furious thug insists that there is no way one man could naturally harvest such an absurd amount of high-quality crystals. The accuser angrily points out that Kodo is merely a bottom-tier black-rank adventurer, making his massive haul incredibly suspicious. The thug loudly accuses him of cheating to afford a haunted noble's mansion on a low-rank salary, though Kodo calmly deflects the insult by calling himself an ordinary adventurer. Escalating the confrontation, the angry man points at the flustered receptionist and accuses Kodo of sleeping with the guild staff to rig his profits. While Nico shamelessly winks at the scandalous accusation, Kodo mentally groans, realizing this chaotic situation is exactly what happens when people spread wild rumors about him. Losing his temper, the desperate thug suddenly grabs Millie as a hostage to force Kodo into a confession, ignoring the little girl's frightened cries of pain. Pulling a dagger on the terrified child, the sweating thug suddenly freezes in terror as Kodo's eyes darken into a lethal, murderous glare. Exploding into a blindingly fast dash, Kodo swings his massive blade upward to disarm the attacker while simultaneously snatching Millie safely out of harm's way. The giant slab of iron stops mere inches from the thug's trembling face, leaving the terrified man whimpering for his life. Casually resting his enormous blade on his shoulder, Kodo stares down at the defeated bully and dryly repeats that he is just an ordinary adventurer. He lets out an exhausted sigh and casually dusts off his coat, completely unfazed by the violent altercation he just ended. As the city guards quickly arrive to drag the humiliated thug out of the guild, Kodo mutters his utter annoyance at the pointless interruption. Nico flashes him an appreciative smile and promises that the guild will handle the paperwork, teasingly noting that he never changes his protective habits. Still reeling from the sudden rescue, Millie simply stares blankly up at the man who just risked everything to save her. Her heart skips a beat as Kodo gently calls her by her name and tells her it is time to go home, prompting an eager, joyful agreement. Watching their retreating backs, Nico smiles warmly to herself, genuinely surprised to hear the infamous lone wolf inviting someone home. As they step outside, Kodo abruptly stops and asks if she knows the way back to the mansion, explaining that he has an errand to run first. Tossing her the heavy iron key, he trusts the grown-up Millie to head back alone, leaving her to proudly salute him as he walks away down the cobblestone street. Beaming with overwhelming admiration, Millie watches Kodo and fiercely vows to make him take her as a teammate. Under the quiet night sky, a solemn Kodo silently ascends a lonely set of wooden stairs. He arrives at a quiet, moonlit graveyard and softly announces his return to someone named Fuko. Sitting beside her tombstone, he gently places a cake down and confesses that he picked up an adventurer with nowhere to go yesterday. Gazing at the grave, he wonders why he was crazy enough to call out to a kid who barely knows what she can do yet. A ghostly, smiling figure stands behind him as he bitterly admits that someone like him shouldn't have comrades. Cutting back to the present, Millie flashes a bright, determined smile and boldly declares that they are a party. At the bustling guild counter, Kodo begs the receptionist to process his request quickly while Millie stubbornly insists they are registering together. Millie loudly proclaims their party status, but Kodo immediately shoots her down with a blunt denial. The annoyed receptionist scolds them for obstructing business, prompting Kodo to apologize and ask for his solo processing. Turning to the desperate healer, Kodo coldly tells her to bow her head and join one of the many parties currently looking for members. As Millie stammers nervously, Kodo demands to know why she is so stubbornly set on teaming up with him specifically. Sweat dropping down her face, she nervously reviews a guild document and comes up with an alternative plan. She confidently points at the paper and asks Kodo to hear out her brand new proposal. Deep inside a gloomy dungeon, a swarm of tiny bats suddenly flutters past a thoroughly unbothered Kodo. Millie cowers in terror at the tiny creatures, but Kodo bluntly informs her that they aren't even real monsters. When she cries out for help, Kodo coldly reminds her that they are not a party and just happen to be walking in the same place. The two adventurers trudge silently through the rugged, crystal-lined corridors of the lower caverns. They suddenly arrive at a diverging path, prompting a panicked Millie to ask which fork leads to the lower floors. She begs Kodo for directions, but he stubbornly refuses to help since they aren't an official team. A flashback reveals the guild receptionist explaining that Kodo's recurring request allows multiple different parties to accept it simultaneously. The receptionist slyly noted that two solo adventurers sharing the same goal often team up by chance inside the dungeon. Back in the present, Kodo realizes the receptionist smooth-talked him into this situation, while Millie happily spots a guiding marker. Millie cheerfully leads the way, while Kodo secretly hopes the dungeon will scare her enough to drop the whole party idea. Suddenly, Millie stops dead in her tracks as something unexpected catches her eye. A fluffy sheep monster appears, causing Millie to scream and jump onto Kodo's back, though he casually identifies it as a common upper area Ariep. The seemingly harmless creature lowers its horns and charges at them with surprising ferocity. Millie confidently readies her staff and claims she can handle these cute, bottom-tier dungeon monsters. She boldly attempts to bonk the beast, but completely misses and tumbles comically across the rocky floor. Kodo stares in sheer disbelief at the crying girl sitting beside the triumphant sheep, quietly comparing her to a helpless toddler. Kodo effortlessly cleaves through a leaping monster with a single, powerful slash of his sword. Millie sits on the dungeon floor nursing a scraped knee while Kodo casually rummages through his bag for supplies. Pointing an accusing finger, Kodo sternly demands to know what the little healer is doing. He coldly reminds her that solo adventurers don't have it easy and warns her against wasting precious magic and stamina on a minor scrape. Acknowledging his logic but overwhelmed by the stinging pain, Millie tearfully asks if she can just heal it anyway. Shifting his focus back to the mission, Kodo explains that they need to collect 3 skulls from skeletons to fulfill a guild request for rare materials. He surveys the Roria City Dungeon skeleton spawning grounds and notes that they will have to cull a decent number of undead to find 3 intact heads. Panicking at the sheer scale of the task, Millie cries out that it is impossible for her and questions why he took a solo job in the first place. Tossing her a spare short sword, Kodo challenges her to easily drop at least 1 skeleton if she truly wants to join his party. Trembling with a mix of fear and determination, Millie tightly grips the unfamiliar weapon. Screaming to pump herself up, the determined healer declares that she will prove her worth and show him what she can do. Kodo watches in utter dismay as the little girl awkwardly charges forward without even knowing how to hold the blade properly. Her brave momentum vanishes instantly when she comes face to face with 3 terrifying skeletons and lets out a pitiful squeak. Watching from a distance, Kodo reasons that while floor 6 skeletons are numerous, they aren't actually tough enough to be a real threat in the upper levels. Despite knowing the monsters are weak, he admits to himself that a lone healer who is used to being protected cannot handle them alone. An undead warrior raises its rusted blade high above its head to strike down the paralyzed girl. Blurring past her in a desperate rescue, Kodo executes a blindingly fast spinning slash that cuts down the approaching threat. Millie watches in awe as Kodo gracefully lands amidst the crumbling bone fragments of his defeated enemies. Casually inspecting a severed skull, Kodo declares that they only need 1 more and offers to finish the job so they can head back. Refusing to be totally useless, an embarrassed Millie lets out a battle cry and wildly swings her dagger at a confused skeleton. Kodo calmly critiques her wild, unfamiliar swings as she desperately tries to land a hit on the nimble undead. Missing her target completely, Millie mentally despairs that her dream of joining a real party is slipping away. Refusing to give up, she blindly thrusts her blade forward with all her might just as a strange light envelopes the steel. Kodo watches in absolute shock as her desperate thrust suddenly triggers a massive, devastating critical strike. The sheer explosive recoil of the impact violently launches the tiny healer backward onto the hard cavern floor. Kodo stands frozen in place, his mind struggling to process the impossible feat he just witnessed. The powerful shockwave completely obliterates the skeleton, shattering its bones into a shower of dust and fragments. Millie groans face down in the dirt while Kodo slowly lowers his sword in stunned silence. The dust clears to reveal a perfectly intact skull and scattered pieces of demon ore dropping onto the stone floor. Staring at the glowing remnants, Kodo realizes in disbelief that the little rookie just executed a guaranteed fatal blow that even he has never managed to trigger. Still trembling on the cavern floor, Millie stares at her trembling hands and wonders in disbelief if she truly managed to defeat the skeletons all by herself. Desperate for validation, the little healer looks up at Kodo and happily asks if she was actually useful during the fight. Kodo swiftly brings her back to reality, warning her that tightly shutting her eyes during an attack leaves her completely full of dangerous openings. Exhausted and crying from the ordeal, Millie asks if she can at least use her healing magic to soothe her injuries before they head back. Watching her pathetic state, Kodo silently deduces that her previous party probably never let her participate in actual combat, treating her strictly as a backline healer. Kodo dismisses her explosive attack as a mere fluke while Millie whines miserably about her clothes being completely ruined by the dungeon mud. Finally emerging from the dark underground, Millie enthusiastically throws her hands up and cheers that they have made it safely outside. Turning to her savior, Millie humbly admits that Kodo still ended up doing all the real work during the grueling extermination quest. To her absolute surprise, Kodo decides to report the quest as a joint effort between himself and the solo adventurer Millie so they can split the reward equally. Staring silently at the older boy, Millie tightly grips her staff as Kodo notices her intense gaze and asks what is wrong. Gathering her courage, Millie asks the surly swordsman why he would actually want to form a party with someone like her. Looking down at the muddy little girl, Kodo honestly answers that he wants her in his party simply because she listens to him and acknowledges his worth. Suddenly embarrassed by his own sincerity, Kodo scolds her for clinging to him while covered in mud and abruptly announces they need to make a stop before returning to the guild. The duo arrives at a bustling, luxurious public bathhouse situated right in the middle of the adventure city. A passing adventurer recognizes the famously unsociable Koto and expresses shock at seeing him casually walking into a public bath. Inside the busy lobby, adventurers of all ranks line up at the reception desk to relax after their grueling dungeon dives. Blinking in absolute awe, Millie looks around the grand architecture of the public facility with shining eyes. Koto notes that while she likely has a private bath at home, she clearly has never been to a public bathhouse based on her ragged adventuring gear. Millie excitedly claims that stopping by a bathhouse after a dungeon dive feels like a true adventurer experience, but sadly admits she has no money to pay for entry. Fidgeting nervously, the little cleric asks Koto if the facility's entry fee is too expensive for a rookie to afford. Waving off her concern, Koto promises to front the money for now, assuring her she can just pay him back from her generous cut of the quest reward. Trusting him completely, Millie happily agrees as Koto points her toward the women's entrance before heading off to wash up himself. Humming a cheerful tune, the muddy little healer practically skips down the polished hallway toward the bathing area. Her cheerful momentum comes to a screeching halt as she spots several incredibly well-endowed female adventurers casually chatting in the locker room. Standing in the shadow of the voluptuous veterans, Millie looks down at her own completely flat chest in stunned silence. Trying to rationalize the massive difference in proportions, she tells herself that veteran adventurers naturally build up impressive physiques over time. Puffing out her chest with misplaced confidence, Millie happily imagines that she too will develop a gorgeous figure once she finally reaches the prestigious red rank. Stripping completely naked in her excitement, Millie carelessly sprints toward the bathing area until a panicked female attendant screams for her to stop. The frustrated bathhouse worker chases after the stark naked little girl, demanding to know where she thinks she is running off to. Grabbing the squeaking cleric from behind, the attendant frantically warns her that the area she is trying to enter is actually a mixed-gender bath. A female guild worker kindly scolds Millie for leaving weapons and gear lying around where they can get stolen, realizing it's her first time here. The worker explains that leaving gear with the staff allows them to cleanse off battle grime, pointing out the nearby laundry area. She adds that adventurers can wash their bodies in the front area before changing into the provided fresh clothes. After thanking her profusely, a nervous Millie hesitantly asks for the helpful worker's name. A short-haired girl named Syl suddenly appears, playfully teasing that she just wanted to chat after spotting such a super cute girl. Grabbing the flustered Millie by the shoulders, Syl cheerfully pushes her toward the bathing area. Entering the massive bathhouse, Syl loudly calls out to Koto, who is standing near the water with a towel around his neck. Millie stares in absolute awe at the sprawling, luxurious bathhouse filled with relaxing adventurers. Koto calmly explains that the top-notch facilities are run by the guild, while Millie marvels that it looks like a noble's estate pond. Millie continues to gaze around the magnificent hot spring, struggling to believe this is just a standard public bath for adventurers. Millie asks if they know each other, and Syl casually greets Koto as Aniki, while he tiredly asks why she is bothering him here. Syl proudly introduces herself as a high-spec thief who steals dungeon loot and gentlemen's hearts, though Koto bluntly mutters that there is absolutely nothing between them. Syl asks why a healer like Millie is with a notoriously solo adventurer like Koto, noting she hasn't seen him team up in ages. Koto simply states that he picked Millie up, prompting a very literal interpretation from the two confused girls. Syl imagines Koto casually scooping up a destitute Millie from a cardboard box on the side of the road. Millie nervously laughs and explains that stuff happened, leading to Koto letting her stay at his place. Hearing this, Syl dramatically spits out her bathwater in sheer shock at the revelation that they are sleeping in the same room. Splashing wildly through the water, an intensely jealous Syl demands an explanation for why Koto ignored all her advances only to shack up with a strange girl. Syl tackles the panicked Millie into the water, absolutely horrified that Koto is partying up and sleeping with such a cute girl. Sinking into the hot spring, Koto tiredly decides to pretend he doesn't know them while Syl aggressively interrogates the drowning healer. Millie frantically points ahead, warning the furious thief to look out before she crashes. Unfazed by the chaos, Koto calmly explains that Millie was simply in trouble and that is all there is to it. Syl glares at him silently, her dripping face a mix of suspicion and lingering jealousy. Relaxing back into the water, Syl playfully declares she will refrain from turning him in for being a creep because she knows he is actually just soft-hearted. Koto places 2 bowls of shaved ice on the edge of the bath, telling the girls he bought them at the shop to help them cool their heads. Millie stares at the frosty treat in wonder, realizing it is her first time eating shaved ice while soaking in a hot tub. She happily sighs that enjoying such blissful luxuries must be the greatest part of being a successful adventurer. Sil completely agrees, noting that these perks aren't just for big earners and that she drops by the bathhouse frequently. Kodo explains that resetting your body and restoring your spirit in places like this before prepping for the next job is basic adventuring logic. The peaceful moment shatters as Sil dramatically splashes him again, loudly accusing him of raising and training Millie to his specific tastes. A cheerful girl with pigtails bids them farewell, loudly announcing she is heading back to her own party. Millie enthusiastically agrees they should hang out again, while the girl playfully admits she is curious why the healer is living at her and Niki's place. Leaning in close, the girl strictly warns Millie not to get too friendly with her brother before departing. Interrupting the farewells, Kodo bluntly announces they are heading back to the guild, leaving Millie slightly confused. Arriving at the receptionist counter, Kodo casually instructs the guild worker to split their reward evenly and bag it separately. Clutching her heavy pouch of coins, Millie's eyes sparkle in utter shock as she realizes she is suddenly rich. She happily notes that Ordum never split this much treasure with her, though Kodo dismisses the sum as nothing special. The busty guild receptionist, Nico, cheerfully greets them both and notes that their joint job must have gone incredibly well. Kodo sighs that Nico's co-op proposal was quite a stretch, but she smugly replies that it clearly worked out. Eager to defend the young girl, Nico points out that the veteran is actually praising her since the job successfully turned into a real cooperative effort. Blushing brightly as Nico calls her amazing, Millie beams with pride while Kodo warns the receptionist not to butter her up too much. Declaring she is off work for the day, Nico happily suggests they celebrate the successful completion with drinks at the tavern on Kodo's tab. Raising a massive wooden mug, Nico gleefully cheers that drinks taste best when an adventurer is paying for them. Taking a quiet sip, Kodo sympathizes with Millie's rough past as Nico asks if her old party ever brought her to lively places like this. Staring down sadly into her cup, Millie quietly admits she was usually sent back to the inn early because she was deemed completely useless. She laments the harsh reality that a healer inevitably ends up becoming burdensome baggage for a combat party. Kodo immediately rejects that notion, explaining that the real problem is the foolish assumption that healers do not have to fight. Staring directly ahead, he bluntly states that Ordum's inability to use her properly is entirely his own fault and that she is far from useless. Nico warmly encourages the blushing girl not to beat herself up, noting that Ordum was clearly too obsessed with immediate results. Expanding on the topic, Nico excitedly explains that advanced healers truly shine when they reach higher classes like the highly sought-after Saintus. However, she solemnly admits that achieving such a rare rank is nearly impossible for someone who only heals safely from the backlines. Smiling knowingly at the veteran swordsman, Nico playfully points out that he clearly cares a lot about Millie's potential. Pressing her advantage, the receptionist cheerfully insists that the two of them should officially form a party, which Kodo instantly rejects. Millie and Nico both stare silently at the stubbornly independent swordsman. Swirling her drink, Nico playfully teases his stubbornness by reminding him that today's success was only possible because they worked together. Refusing to yield, Kodo coldly replies that while he appreciates her sentiment, she is simply meddling in his affairs. The fragile healer looks down with a heartbroken expression as his harsh rejection echoes between them. Swallowing her disappointment, Millie timidly tells Nico she will not force the issue since Kodo has made his stance so clear. Refusing to drop the subject, Nico challenges the veteran by pointing out that he did not start his career as a solo adventurer. Glaring at his plate of food, Kodo quietly concedes that he had his rookie days too and used to be part of a team. A terrifying skeletal beast looms in the shadows as a dark memory surfaces, reminding him that this tragedy is simply a common story. The painful memories of love and absolute despair begin to echo, recalling the fateful day his entire party was completely wiped out with him as the sole survivor. In a vivid flashback, a young and inexperienced Koto nervously questions their leader, Patos, about the wisdom of descending all the way down to depth 16. Patos quickly dismisses the boy's concerns about the dangerous 10th floor, insisting that an elite party had already cleared the monsters and left plenty of loot behind. Glaring at the rookie, the arrogant leader sharply rebukes Koto for talking back and refuses to let such a profitable opportunity slip away. Another veteran chimes in, advising the young swordsman to trust his older comrades since this perilous experience will ultimately feed his growth. Hesitant but unwilling to disobey, the young boy watches the confident veterans march deeper into the unforgiving labyrinth. Sweating with nervous anxiety, Kodo and his childhood friend whisper to each other that they are far too inexperienced to challenge the leader's reckless decision. As mere obsidian rank rookies with only a few dungeon runs under their belts, the two childhood friends had no choice but to rely entirely on the veteran party. Suddenly, a horrifying sight stops the young adventurers dead in their tracks, freezing the blood in their veins. They stumble upon a gruesome slaughterhouse deep within the dungeon, discovering the scattered remains of the elite party that supposedly cleared the floor. Staring at a severed arm, they realize with mounting dread that even adventurers equipped with top-grade gear were effortlessly butchered here. Panicking at the sight of the carnage, the greedy veterans desperately scramble to grab the leftover loot before the mysterious killers return. Trembling beside his terrified friend, the young Kodo admits that neither of them truly understood the sheer gravity of their situation yet. Fleeing past the skeletal remains of fallen warriors, they were about to learn that death sits much closer to everyday life than anyone ever realizes. Oblivious to the creeping danger, the veteran party hastily regroups around a plundered treasure chest to secure their ill-gotten wealth. Wiping the sweat from his brow, a veteran sighs in relief and declares their scavenging mission a complete success. Smirking triumphantly, Pados boasts that a dangerous place like this is no place for obsidian-rank kids to stroll into and calls it a valuable lesson. Holding up a glowing gemstone, the arrogant leader lectures the rookies that true adventurers must sometimes boldly ignore danger and step forward of their own free will. A colossal, demonic beast materializes silently directly behind the boasting veterans, instantly shattering their false sense of security. In a blinding flash of violence, the massive creature swings its blade and effortlessly slices through the party before they can even react. Frozen in absolute terror, Koto and his childhood friend watch helplessly as the towering monstrosity effortlessly decimates their supposed protectors. The monstrous beast unleashes a deafening, blood-curdling roar that echoes through the cavernous depths of the labyrinth. The traumatized swordsman bleakly notes that there is simply nothing worth saying about the sheer butchery that immediately followed. Desperately sprinting for their lives, the two terrified rookies flee blindly through the crumbling stone corridors. Shattered debris rains down around them as Koto realizes they were being effortlessly trampled like insignificant ants beneath a child's heel. Bleeding and utterly broken on the dungeon floor, his final haunting memory is cradling the lifeless body of his beloved childhood friend. Tears stream down his blood-stained face as the young swordsman screams in sheer agony, completely consumed by the monster's looming shadow. Returning to the present, a heavy silence falls over the tavern table as Millie and Nico listen solemnly to his tragic tale. Gently touching the deep scar on his cheek, Kodo quietly admits that when he finally regained consciousness, he was lying entirely alone outside the dungeon, having failed to save anyone. Sitting with a companion, Kodo admits that what he went through is a common story whenever adventurers gather. When his companion suggests he was simply unlucky, Kodo solemnly corrects her by stating he lacked the strength to protect his comrades. He explains that adventurers only seem dazzling because the world solely focuses on the lucky ones who strike it rich and make it back alive. Staring into the distance, he reflects on the forgotten graves of those who never return and the broken survivors who quietly quit the life. As the bustling tavern cheers for another round, the young woman admires how Kodo keeps working, earns quietly, and even treats his friends. Lowering his gaze, Koto confesses that he has simply had enough of enduring that kind of agonizing pain. With a hardened expression, he firmly declares that he is perfectly fine staying entirely alone. A heavy silence falls over the balcony table as the young woman processes his bitter resignation. Breaking the quiet tension, she softly asks if he is truly okay with living such an isolated existence. Taking a bite of his meal, Kodo insists that he has grown stronger and that going solo does not hold his livelihood back at all. Looking at him with deep empathy, she gently points out how incredibly lonely that path is. Pausing with his wooden mug halfway to his mouth, Kodo genuinely questions the concept of feeling lonely. She recognizes the immense trauma he survived, noting that the awful truth must feel even worse than the tragic story he shared. When she argues that venturing into the dungeon alone is inherently wrong, Kodo interjects to claim that is exactly why he does it. Taking a slow sip from his mug, he challenges her to explain what could possibly be wrong with relying solely on himself. He grips his drink tightly, his scarred face betraying the deep-seated guilt still haunting his every waking moment. The young healer stands up fully, refusing to back down from his defensive and self-destructive reasoning. With absolute conviction, she tells him that this solitary lifestyle is not a strategy, but rather a cruel punishment he inflicts upon himself. Her piercing words catch Koto completely off guard, widening his eyes as the painful truth finally hits him. She explains that hearing his story made her realize he avoids comrades not out of strength, but strictly to punish himself. She acknowledges how agonizing it is for him to face the dark dungeons alone no matter how deeply he regrets his past failures. Staring right into his weary soul, she bluntly states that no one is ever going to forgive him for surviving that day. She points out the tragic irony that his endless solitude and regret will never bring back the comrades he lost. Thrusting her healing staff forward, she boldly demands that he must start adventuring together with new comrades. Koto suddenly remembers the rainy day he first met the young woman sitting in an alleyway, wondering why he ever called out to her. Back in the past, he warned the enthusiastic healer that he might get her killed, but she cheerfully dismissed his dark fears. Desperately grabbing his shirt, she begged him to train her, arguing that a healer is exactly what a man afraid of losing comrades truly needs. Shining with unshakable optimism, she vividly dreamed of diving all the way down to depth 16 with a full party of trusted friends. Returning to the present, the young healer offers a warm smile and asks if he hasn't secretly known this truth all along. Staring toward the illuminated depths of a ruined staircase, the narrative finally accepts that it is time to move forward. Staring intently at the veteran swordsman, Nico asks what he plans to do now. Closing his eyes with a defeated sigh, Koto finally relents to the pressure. Turning his gaze to the nervous girl, he officially announces that she is in his party. Millie's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as the incredible news slowly registers in her mind. Overcome with joy, the tiny healer leaps into the air with a triumphant cheer while her friends smile warmly. Landing softly, she flashes a radiant, pure smile of absolute happiness. Watching her celebrate, a rare, gentle smile crosses Koto's normally stoic face. The newly formed party happily clinks their wooden mugs together to celebrate their official partnership. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, an aggressive swordsman named Ordum kicks his chair in sheer frustration. Furious at their slow progress, Ordum violently blames their delays on the useless runt of a healer they previously had in their party. Grabbing his gear, the agitated leader commands his current team to head out immediately. The heavily armored blonde knight coldly reminds him to quit dawdling if they ever want to reach depth 16. Reflecting on his solo past, Koto acknowledges that he somehow ended up taking in a lonely healer by pure chance. Although he only intended to give her a temporary place to stay, her stubborn persistence ultimately led them to officially form a party. The next morning, Koto tries to wake the two deeply sleeping girls sprawling on his floor. Completely ignoring his call, Nico and Millie continue to comfortably snooze under their shared blanket. The veteran simply watches the drooling healer sleep peacefully, utterly failing to wake her up. Stirring a pot of hot soup, he finally shouts for her to wake up if she truly wants to become the best healer in town. Strutting casually in her lacy underwear, Nico thanks him for the morning bath while Millie shrieks in embarrassment. Savoring the hot potato soup, the receptionist admits she hasn't had a proper breakfast in ages since living alone in the guild dorms is utterly unglamorous. Nico enviously notes that established adventurers with their own houses live completely differently, prompting Koto to suspect she is just being sarcastic. Pumping her fists with excitement, Millie declares she is completely fired up to tackle the dungeon as a true party today. Her enthusiasm shatters instantly when Koto bluntly informs her that they are not going to the dungeon today. Overlooking the bustling city streets, the veteran explains that they are going shopping instead. Walking through the lively morning market, Millie pouts that she wishes Nico could have joined them instead of going to work. Confused by their destination, she wonders if her current staff and robe aren't good enough as Koto plans to buy her proper weapons and armor. Pointing at a weapons stall, he suggests she train as a magic swordsman to gain physical combat experience rather than just staying a backline healer. Admitting he doesn't know much about training healers, Koto resolves to try everything to help her get stronger on her own. Taking his advice entirely too far, Millie wildly tries to buy every massive greatsword in sight until Koto swiftly shuts her down. The cheerful, mustached shopkeeper warmly welcomes them to the Arakirius weapons shop on Hinuki Street. Stepping into a well-stocked weapons shop, Koto is immediately recognized by a cheerful voice calling out his name. A chubby shopkeeper warmly welcomes them in, eagerly announcing that they just received a whole new shipment of adventurer goods. Millie lets out a startled yelp as Koto explains he wants a full set of swordsman gear exclusively for her, completely shocking the staff. A muscular female blacksmith scoffs at the idea, warning them that a scrawny healer lacks the stamina and speed to ever survive as a frontline swordsman. Millie shrinks back in fear as Kodo glares at the judgmental staff, bluntly telling them to stop being so picky about their customers. Desperate to keep the sale, the shopkeeper apologizes for his stubborn craftsmen and pivots to showing them armor sized for small females. He proudly presents the fresh in-stock Astonat lizard set, which makes Millie look like she is wearing a ridiculous, scaly monster costume. The little healer tearfully protests that real monsters will mistake her for one of them, but the shopkeeper insists the unique leather is perfectly light and durable. Ignoring her utter dismay, the enthusiastic merchant loudly announces that he has many more highly recommended options to show them. Millie is forced to model a goofy elephant-themed outfit and a giraffe-pattern dress, both touted as incredibly popular regional sets. Sweating with embarrassment, Kodo asks if they have anything that looks slightly nicer, deeply offending the proud shopkeeper. The blacksmith sternly reminds them that leather gear is for practicality over looks, while the shopkeeper insists it is the perfect starter armor for someone merely playing swordsman. Completely deadpan, Millie stares blankly ahead from beneath the floppy ears of her heavy elephant helmet. Exhausted by the ridiculous selection, Kodo sighs and turns for the door, suggesting they simply try their luck at another shop. Panicking at the thought of failing him, a tearful Millie bravely declares that wearing ugly armor is just another party trial she must endure. Desperate not to lose his wealthy customer, the shopkeeper throws up his hands and orders the blacksmith to bring out their more expensive, non-leather stock. The blacksmith proudly wheels out the Roria-style Moonlight model, a beautiful, softly glowing set of armor highly prized by female adventurers. Genuinely impressed by the exquisite craftsmanship, Koto urges a blushing, delighted Millie to try it on immediately. Sparkling in her stunning new diamond and ruby-accented armor, Millie feels raw power surging through her but nervously realizes it must cost a fortune. Koto watches her quietly, a soft expression crossing his scarred face as he sees how genuinely happy the tiny healer looks. Panicking over the exorbitant price tag, Millie frantically pulls out her own meager pouch of coins and offers it to the amused shopkeeper. Koto gently stops her, reassuring the anxious girl that his massive reward payout will easily cover it and telling her to just pick what she likes. The satisfied duo bows their heads in thanks to the shopkeeper as they step back out into the sunlit streets of Roria City. Their quest for gear next brings them to the dusty, cluttered entrance of Schneider Pawnshop. Entering the dimly lit store, Kodo explains to a curious Millie that they still need a sword and lesser-known shops often hide the best treasures. Millie lets out a terrified shriek as a bespectacled old pawnbroker suddenly pops up from behind a towering pile of junk. The old man warmly greets Kodo like an old friend, while Millie nervously imagines the frail shopkeeper fighting off dungeon monsters. Schneider notes that the little healer is trying to play swordsman and advises her to carry a light sword with a short blade as backup while he rummages through his wares. Millie nervously admits she has no idea how to identify a good weapon, but Kodo casually instructs her to choose whichever one catches her eye. The old pawnbroker chuckles warmly as Kodo reassures the hesitant girl that while the selection is small, absolutely every blade in this shop is of solid quality. Gazing around the cluttered antique shop, Millie carefully inspects the various treasures and weapons scattered across the dusty tables. Koto gently interrupts her browsing to suggest a safe-looking dagger, asking Millie for her thoughts on the simple weapon. The old shopkeeper reveals the dagger is actually a cursed blade named Exios, destined to only break its curse when a weakling rises to become a ruler. Trembling with newfound excitement, Millie claims she can actually feel the heartbeat of a ruler pulsing from the cursed blade, while a sweating Kodo wonders if that is just the curse's effect taking hold. Seeing her enthusiasm, the shopkeeper promises to throw the dagger in for free if Kodo agrees to purchase a bronze sword, making Millie beam with delight. Promising to grow stronger, Millie enthusiastically accepts the dark blade and declares she will become a ruler. As they leave the shop, Kodo sighs that he didn't expect to receive a cursed weapon, but decides it will be fine as long as there are no weird side effects. Before she can step fully out the door, the old shopkeeper suddenly calls out to the young lady. Eyeing her wooden staff, the merchant casually offers to take the fine item as a trade-in if she is truly switching her class to swords. Clutching the staff protectively to her chest, Millie softly declines the offer because the item is deeply important to her. The shopkeeper kindly smiles and tells her to take care on her way back, prompting a cheerful nod from the eager young healer. Rushing back outside to a waiting Koto, Millie happily announces she has stocked up on daily necessities so she can freeload at his mansion forever. Carrying an impossibly large stack of snacks and potions, she brightly declares her intention to work hard while Koto sweat drops at her massive haul. Determined to no longer rely on his charity for baths and gear, she proudly proclaims her new dream of becoming the strongest magic swordsman so she can be super useful. Striking a dramatic pose with her cursed dagger, she cheers about her amazing armor and incredible-looking new weapon. With absolute sincerity burning in her eyes, Millie swears to give her all so that Koto will never regret making her his companion. Her grand speech is immediately cut short by a swift, gentle chop to the head from Koto. Rubbing her sore head, Millie looks up at him in pure confusion. Looking down at her with a gentle, reassuring expression, Koto reaches out to comfort his overly enthusiastic new partner. He softly advises her not to force herself, recognizing that she is still deeply hung up on the cruel things her last party said to her. Reminding her that they are genuine companions now, he insists she doesn't need to push herself so hard just to earn his acknowledgement. Handing her a glowing sun pendant, Koto explains that the magical trinket glows brighter near the dungeon's exit, making it a perfect safeguard for a rookie like her. He casually holds up a second matching pendant, noting that the pushy shopkeeper shoved 2 of them into his hands so he might as well wear it too. Touched by his thoughtful gesture, Millie quietly agrees that it is time to go home. Walking beside him, she suddenly pauses as she clutches her new gear, her mind racing with unfamiliar emotions. A deep blush spreads across her cheeks as she gazes fondly at Koto's back, feeling an overwhelming sense of belonging. She wonders internally why this warm, comforting feeling feels so strangely foreign to her. Later that evening, the two arrive at Koto's impressive home located on the outskirts of Roria City. Dressed in her nightgown and carrying a candle, Millie happily reintroduces herself to the narrative as the healer who officially became Koto's companion. Wandering the massive, empty manor, she realizes how big it is for just 2 people, but feels immense pride that she can finally live and eat here by Koto's side. Fresh from her bath, Millie wanders the dark hallway with a flickering candle, hoping to peek into other rooms since she cannot find the dining room. Refusing to admit she is lost, the tiny healer pumps herself up and declares she is simply exploring her brand new home. She flinches as the candlelight suddenly reveals a creepy suit of armor, wishing Koto would keep the massive house properly lit. Spotting a faint light emanating from the stairs, she realizes she has stumbled upon the wine cellar Koto mentioned earlier. Shivering from the sudden chill in the air, she cautiously descends the stone steps. Peeking timidly around the corner, she calls out to ask if the veteran swordsman is down here. Her eyes go wide with absolute terror as she spots a massive, looming figure bent over in the darkness. Dropping her candle in a complete panic, she turns and sprints away screaming about a terrifying but ghost while Koto watches her flee in utter confusion. Meanwhile, a half-dressed Nico casually tips back a heavy wooden mug to chug her stolen wine. The busty receptionist cheerfully explains she returned for dinner and his excellent hidden wine, prompting Koto to sigh and ask why she is actually here again. Beaming happily, Nico insists that eating together is simply more fun, prompting the defeated swordsman to fetch her a plate. Without wasting another second, the hungry receptionist happily digs into the delicious meal. Koto warns the receptionist that mooching meals off an adventurer could leave her stuck if he ever demands guild favors in return. Popping open a fresh bottle of wine, Nico playfully dismisses his logic while Koto firmly reminds her he is not obligated to feed her twice a day. Leaning in with a smug smirk, Nico teasingly questions if a grown man living entirely alone with an 11-year-old girl is considered sensible. Koto immediately grimaces as he imagines his former party members assuming the absolute worst about his new living arrangement. Puffing out her chest, the confident receptionist happily announces she has come up with a remarkably clever solution. Slapping her heavy luggage onto the table, Nico proudly declares she should move in too because her presence will completely dilute his perviness. Koto instantly rejects the ridiculous idea, arguing that a solo adventurer living with guild staff will easily spark terrible rumors of its own. Ignoring his protests, Nico casually decides she is staying the night anyway since it is already late and he has spare rooms. Taking in the night air on the balcony, Nico jokes about ruining the quiet neighborhood while Millie happily anticipates all their late-night chats. The tiny healer praises the sturdy house and notes there are no real ghosts besides the but ghost, leaving Nico completely baffled. Laughing warmly, Nico praises the young girl's incredible luck since very few adventurers ever manage to purchase their own homes. Suddenly remembering her shopping trip, Millie presents a small box she bought earlier to celebrate officially joining the party. Carefully popping the lid, she reveals a pristine blue feather resting on the soft cushion inside. Nico explains the beautiful hair ornament is a famous adventurer's charm meant to bring good luck, completely touched that Millie bought it for her. Gazing fondly back into the house, the receptionist admits she is incredibly happy Kodo finally found a companion after wandering alone for so long. Smiling gently at the young healer, Nico sincerely hopes Millie becomes the one who finally brings the veterans some much-needed good luck. The fragile girl stares silently at the charm, letting the weight of Nico's heartfelt words sink in. Clenching the box tightly, Millie firmly declares it isn't selfish to ask because hearing about his lonely past made her truly sad. Clutching her new gear, Millie excitedly vows to make Kodo happy to repay him for saving her from her profound loneliness. She quietly whispers a promise to herself to do whatever it takes to remain by his side. Nico cheerfully announces she is heading to the bath while the little healer promises to pack her gear for tomorrow's expedition. Alone in her bedroom, Millie eagerly inspects her beautiful moonlight model armor and brandishes her brand new dagger, Exios. Holding the gleaming blade high, she marvels at how incredibly cool she looks fully equipped as a frontline fighter. She proudly reviews her supplies, noting she even bought a dungeon map drawing set exactly like the one Kodo uses. Imagining herself fully geared up, she vividly pictures her transformation into a genuinely impressive and capable adventurer. In her mind's eye, she bravely stands her ground with a sword and shield against a towering, muscular minotaur. She admits with awe that she never truly imagined a mere healer like herself could ever take down massive area bosses. A nostalgic smile crosses her face as she remembers how she secretly dreamed of epic battles when she first started adventuring. Staring down at her hands, she realizes the harsh realities of her past had forced her to completely forget those grand ambitions. Touching her glowing hairpin, she feels a renewed sense of purpose welling up inside her chest. With her heart pounding excitedly, she desperately wishes to go adventuring so Kodo can finally see her truly shine. She reflects on her deep gratitude toward the stoic swordsman who found her in the rain, took her in, and made her his true companion. Giggling to herself, she hopes that performing well in the dungeon will also impress the friendly receptionist Nico. Hugging her knees on the bed, the eager girl excitedly whispers that she absolutely cannot wait for tomorrow to arrive. Glancing around her designated room, she decides to finish unpacking the rest of the items she purchased earlier. She happily gazes at the neat pile of shopping bags resting on her pristine white bedsheets. Marveling at her new underwear, she gratefully recalls how she previously only had ragged, patched garments to wear. A flashback reveals the shopkeeper convincing her that all top-tier female adventurers wear expensive, heat-resistant lingerie under their armor. Holding up the scandalous black lace panties, she ignores her completely empty wallet and confidently asserts that looking the part is crucial for a pro. Later that night, an eerie silence falls over the dark, sprawling grounds of the supposedly haunted mansion. Suddenly, a strange rustling noise pierces the quiet, causing the little healer to jolt upward in pure terror. Trembling beneath her blankets, she frantically recalls the terrifying rumors about the rundown estate being infested with ghosts. Heavy, dragging footsteps echo menacingly down the hallway, drawing closer to her bedroom door and making her squeak in fear. Clutching her dagger in a total panic, she realizes the chaotic clattering cannot possibly just be Nico returning from the bath. A muffled voice desperately begs someone to stop, frantically insisting that the haunting rumors are completely fake. Terrifying, shadowy figures seem to loom menacingly in the dark corridor, twisting into monstrous shapes ready to strike. The spooky illusion shatters as Koto exasperatedly carries a drunken, half-naked Nico down the hall, scolding her for overheating in the bath and breaking his decorations. Spotting Millie in her scandalous new panties, the intoxicated receptionist lunges forward to affectionately hug the screaming girl while Koto watches the chaotic scene in utter disbelief. A starlit night sky sets the scene as a flustered Millie cries out, begging Kodo not to look at her like that, while he flatly denies looking and tells her to go to sleep. The next morning arrives, showing a grand building with flags waving in the breeze before zooming in on Millie clearing her throat to speak. Standing inside the bustling guild hall, a cheerful receptionist informs Kodo and Millie that their official party registration is complete. Emerging from the guild doors, the receptionist wishes the newly registered adventurers good luck for the day as Kodo inspects a document. Pointing toward their destination, Kodo startles Millie as she internally vows to make him watch her and silently pleads for his support so she can wow him. The scene shifts to the ominous Roria City dungeon, an intimidating cavern guarded by armed skeleton monsters. This ruin-like cave dungeon formed naturally in the forest, and while rumors say it plunges to floor 20, few adventurers ever reach that far to confirm the truth. Because the magic or mine from the dungeon provides vital income for the city, guild staff strictly manage entry to prevent poaching by unregistered adventurers. Newer adventurers safely gather for support around a bustling guild outpost, which is strategically located on the upper floors where monsters are relatively weak. Heavily armed warriors and magic users pass through this very outpost, using it as a stepping stone to challenge the deeper, more dangerous floors below. The serious atmosphere breaks when confused onlookers suddenly spot a small girl doing something highly unusual nearby. Trembling with intense physical exertion, Millie weakly calls out Koto's name as she struggles through her bizarre activity. Crowds of seasoned adventurers laugh and cheer as they realize the tiny, unknown girl is furiously doing push-ups right in the middle of the dungeon outpost. Stripped of her heavy armor, a sweating, miserable Millie strains against the dirt floor while Koto watches her pathetic push-up attempt from above. Trembling with exertion and teary-eyed, Millie claims this is mostly spirit training, prompting Koto to coldly order her to talk less and work more. A flashback reveals a fully armored, shining Millie confidently presenting her guild badge to a guard, who grants them entry while warning them not to cause trouble. The moment she stepped inside the dungeon, Millie immediately collapsed face first onto the hard stone with a painful thud. Struggling to lift herself off the ground, a panicked Millie whimpers to Koto that her gear is suddenly impossibly heavy. Shocked by her sudden immobility, Koto notes that her beginner gear should be the lightest and priciest set available. Koto patiently explains that proper weapons and armor only reveal their true, heavy weight and power once inside a dungeon. Elaborating further, he points out that a fire sword outside is just a normal blade, making it clear that her inability to wear her armor inside means she is simply too untrained. Trembling pathetically on the floor, Millie listens helplessly as Koto sighs, admitting he didn't expect her to be this bad and noting they cannot even talk strategy if she cannot stand. Recalling the traumatic insult from her past party, who called her a useless little shrimp and kicked her out, Millie squeezes her eyes shut in humiliation. Snapping her out of her dark thoughts, Koto simply orders her to take the heavy armor off for now. Returning to the present, Millie grinds out her 67th push-up as Koto declares that they will train her body. Counting her reps as she collapses with a groan, Koto casually mentions she hasn't even hit 100 yet while she desperately questions if this is even meaningful. Koto explains that since she cannot build muscle in a day, the immediate goal is to adapt her body to the dungeon's environment so she can move at a minimum while wearing gear. Wailing in despair over her useless Roria-style Moonlight model armor, Millie learns that if she does not train inside the dungeon, her expensive gear will remain mere decoration. Unfazed by her crying, Koto ruthlessly orders her back to work, reminding her that she cannot accomplish anything if she literally cannot move. A few grueling hours later, a completely exhausted Millie realizes she can finally move in her armor, though she fears she is already at her absolute physical limit. Koto holds a quest flyer and tells Millie she's finally at the starting line, announcing their next task is practical sword work to cull Depth 1 monsters. Gesturing forward, he explains he will lure the monsters out one by one so she can finish them off. A small goblin crouches on the ground ahead of them, which Koto remarks is only as strong as a rough kid and perfect practice for rookies. Gripping her dagger nervously, Millie agrees to give it a try while Koto assures her that a few solid hits will take the creature down. Shouting with determination, Millie charges straight at the bewildered goblin with her weapon drawn. She wildly swings her dagger but completely misses the goblin, spinning right past Koto instead. Koto sighs quietly as the goblin dances around Millie's clumsy, repetitive misses. Reaching out to grab her head and stop her frantic spinning, Koto asks how she managed to hit behind herself. The goblin suddenly leaps forward with a screech, slamming its club into the ground as Millie shrieks in panic. As Millie cowers, Koto reminds her to land a solid hit before the monster gets her, pointing out that even small creatures are dangerous. Millie frantically slashes through the air over and over, missing the agile goblin every single time. Sweating and pointing accusingly at the smirking creature, Millie insists it must be using amazing magic or is the super strong child of a goblin king, which Koto deadpans and dismisses. Pointing calmly forward, Koto instructs her to watch carefully and aim well instead of closing her eyes when striking. Realizing Koto is actively trying to teach her unlike Ordom, Millie finds her resolve and tightens her grip on the dagger. Determined to respond to his efforts, she readies herself and lunges forward once again. She swings with all her might, striking the rocky ground with surprising force while Koto watches closely. Koto suddenly draws his massive sword and leaps into action, warning her to hold on. As his sword glows with a mysterious light, Millie watches in awe and wonders why she feels pulled toward him again. The goblin stares in shock at a freshly created crater in the earth. Realizing the light is shaping a path, Kodo calls out Millie's name as an idea forms in his mind. Turning toward him, Millie repeats the phrase, "guaranteed attack," in visible confusion. She admits she doesn't really understand frontliner techniques or know if it is a specific skill. Kodo explains it makes sense she doesn't know, since even Ordum's frontline team probably never saw it in action. He describes it as an attack that deals massive damage regardless of the user's actual strength, sometimes felling monsters in a single blow. Kodo reveals he had only heard rumors of it until he witnessed Millie use it herself. Surprised, Millie admits she was just in the zone, while Kodo explains it's the exact reason she could defeat a tougher skeleton earlier. Still holding her dagger, Millie is shocked to realize she is the one performing the technique, which Kodo confirms he suspected she could use. Millie immediately gets restless, excitedly thinking she might be a genius with a special move, but Kodo tells her to listen first. Staring at the cratered ground, Millie realizes she made the hole herself, which Kodo says is proof of the attack's strength even if she triggered it accidentally. He concludes by explaining the attack is tied to her luck stat, warning that it might be too occasional to control right now. Kodo warns Millie not to rely on her new skill as her main option yet, and especially tells her not to hit him with it. Undeterred, Millie declares her plan is to make the skill completely usable and her own. Sighing in resignation, Kodo outlines a training plan starting with steady strength work and sword drills so she can memorize the feel if the skill triggers again. He explains that mastering the timing will ensure she becomes more than just a healer holding a sword. Millie smiles brightly, enthusiastically accepting his terms. Kodo hands her a bronze sword for 100 practice swings, warning her that her dagger is bad for training before casually mentioning he will bring more goblins. Sweating and exhausted, Millie repeatedly swings her sword under Kodo's watchful count, drawing curious looks from passing adventurers. Resting against the cavern wall, she pants heavily about the rough road ahead, though Kodo praises her for growing so much in just one day. He proudly displays their completed goblin call request and a few magic stones, noting that she managed to take down a few herself despite taking a beating. Millie beams with pride, realizing that true adventurers live off these small, hard-earned wins despite the meager pay. Eager to share, she happily opens a container and offers Kodo a bento she made with Nico's help that morning. Kodo stares blankly at the questionable, lumpy meal, suddenly remembering a suspicious smell emanating from their kitchen earlier. He sternly reminds her that they are not here for a picnic and that guild rations aren't enough for real dungeon work. Disgusted by whatever she put in the omelet, Kodo firmly declares that neither she nor Nico must ever be allowed to cook again. Millie innocently suggests making lizard tail sandwiches next time, prompting Kodo to immediately ban lizard meat and warn her that lower floors won't allow for long lunch breaks. Happily munching on her food, she smiles and notes that eating after moving around so much is truly delicious. She admits that suddenly using a sword was difficult, but credits the experience for helping her notice the feeling of a guaranteed attack. Glowing with satisfaction, she reflects on how fun it is to actually fight and adventure on her own instead of just tagging along. Kodo warns her that she might be getting a bit too relaxed, though he admits it is fine as long as she avoids carelessness. Suddenly, heavy and ominous footsteps rumble across the rocky cavern floor. Shocked, Kodo and Millie watch as panicked adventurers sprint past them, screaming for everyone to fall back from a monster way above their level. A massive, grotesque troll stomps into the corridor, its hulking frame blocking the path. Kodo identifies the beast as an area boss, explaining that these overly strong monsters sometimes stray up from the lower floors. Stepping forward, he draws his weapon and declares he will take care of it before it causes more trouble. Millie stares intensely at the looming threat, her grip tightening on her sword. Determined to prove herself, she steps up and announces her intention to show the results of her training by fighting it. A sudden flash of insight washes over her, and she excitedly realizes the signs of her guaranteed attack are manifesting. Dropping her guard entirely, she turns back to eagerly tell Kodo about the attack, ignoring his panicked scream calling her an idiot. Kodo desperately yells for her not to rush in, warning that there isn't just one monster. A second, chained troll materializes from the side and viciously backhands the distracted Millie, sending her flying through the air. As an exhausted Millie slumps helplessly against the cavern wall, a massive monster suddenly turns and dashes aggressively toward her with a guttural roar. Before the beast can strike, Kodo lunges into the fray with blinding speed and swings his heavy blade directly toward the monster's face. The powerful strike connects with a heavy impact, sending the stunned beast staggering backward in pain as another troll looms in the background. Dropping into a protective crouch beside his groaning companion, Kodo urgently calls out Millie's name to check her condition. Reassuring her that her high-quality armor absorbed the brunt of the damage, he firmly instructs her to wait there while he handles the threat. Standing up to face the enraged, roaring monsters, Kodo grips his weapon and calmly declares that he will finish this battle quickly. His expression hardens into a mask of pure concentration as his intense, unyielding gaze locks onto the towering enemies. Exploding forward with incredible momentum, Kodo charges directly into the towering beast's guard. He masterfully drops low to the ground, sliding gracefully beneath the creature's sweeping attacks while keeping his blade perfectly poised. The giant monster throws a devastating punch, but Kodo effortlessly evades the crushing blow by slipping right past its massive fist. With a swift and brutal upward slash, Kodo cleanly severs the troll's arm, sending the beast howling in sheer agony. The sheer force of the brutal counterattack sends shockwaves rippling through the cavern air as rock and dust explode around them. Following through his deadly arc, Kodo lands gracefully as the sheer force of his strike causes the monster to violently collapse in the background. Wasting no time, he pivots sharply and launches himself at the remaining troll, bringing his heavy blade down in a devastating arc. The secondary beast lets out a final agonizing shriek before crumpling to the cavern floor in a defeated heap. Watching the incredible display of skill, a dazed Millie weakly murmurs his name before her strength completely gives out and she collapses. Suddenly, another massive troll lunges from the shadows, attempting to ambush Kodo with a brutal blindside strike. Reacting instantly, Kodo leaps high into the air and drives his heavy blade squarely into the beast's back with a thunderous slam. His eyes burn with lethal precision as he fully commits to the downward swing, putting all of his momentum behind the heavy blade. Driving the beast completely into the stone floor, Kodo flawlessly demonstrates the crushing power of a true sword strike. Leaving his massive blade embedded in the defeated monster, Kodo rolls away and urgently sprints back toward his fallen companion. Dropping anxiously to his knees, he gently lifts the unconscious healer and softly calls her name. Seeing that she is completely unresponsive, he carefully prepares to move her out of the dangerous dungeon environment. Hoisting the tiny healer onto his back, he proves himself to be a reliable protector with a kind and broad presence. Back at the safety of the guild camp, astonished adventurers gossip about the rogue troll that wandered into the first level and was swiftly slaughtered by an unknown passing party. The bustling safe zone hums with quiet activity as merchants organize goods and wounded adventurers recover on makeshift cots. Blinking away the darkness, Millie suddenly gasps and sits bolt upright in her recovery bed. Disoriented and panicked, she frantically looks around and stammers out questions about the terrifying monster. Sitting patiently by her bedside, Kodo gazes down at her with a soft, deeply relieved smile on his face. A nearby medical staffer assures the young healer that she is physically fine, prompting Kodo to calmly explain that she is safe in the first-level guild outpost. Kneeling beside the resting rookies, Kodo gently advises them not to push themselves and hands over a potion for their recovery. Sitting alone on a bed, Millie tearfully apologizes for messing up on her very first day. Taking a seat beside her, Kodo admits he should have stopped her from rushing in, but she insists the fault was hers as well. Looking her in the eye, Kodo firmly states that he should have protected her since they are teammates now. Pumping her fists energetically, Millie declares she took down several goblins and promises to defeat even a troll next time with her guaranteed attack, reminding him she cannot always be protected. Kodo heads out to fetch their abandoned gear, leaving Millie to grimace as she forces down a nasty potion to regain her strength. Left alone in the tent, Millie blushes deeply as her heart pounds at the sudden memory of Kodo rushing to save her. Later that evening, the sky darkens over the peaceful town as the adventurers return to the surface. Wandering the lively streets together, Millie gasps in amazement as they approach a bustling tavern. A busta maid suddenly appears with a tray of food, excitedly congratulating the duo on officially forming a party and surviving their first dungeon run. Responding to a customer's call, Sil quickly explains to a baffled Kodo that she is working a side job at the tavern for extra money. Bragging that she researched his preferences top to bottom, Sil confidently takes Kodo's food order before bouncing off to work. Sil returns with drinks, playfully serving Millie a special beverage meant for the workout healer. The entire tavern erupts into laughter as patrons gossip about a ridiculous adventurer doing push-ups on depth 1, leaving Millie mortified. As Millie cries out in sheer embarrassment, Kodo admits he had no idea she would be unable to move in her gear while Sil teases that she wanted to see the spectacle too. Kodo offers a reassuring smile, pointing out that at least her rigorous acclimation means she can now handle her chosen equipment. He casually adds that seeing her pumpkin shorts made it worth it for the onlookers, causing Millie to agree with hesitant embarrassment. Outside the lively tavern, heavy boots approach as a menacing presence nears the entrance. Leaning against their table, Sil smiles warmly and notes that the two of them seem to be in a genuinely good place. The mood shifts as Sil casually brings up rumors accusing Kodo of being a pervert for getting so close to the young girl, leaving him utterly dismayed. Sil apologizes for the gossip but points out that Millie constantly asked to be his companion. Kodo gently brushes off the apology, stating that if anyone needs to apologize, it should be him. Changing the subject, Sil asks about Millie's actual potential since Kodo took her in for training. Smiling softly, Kodo praises Millie's guts and solid fundamentals, predicting she will become a capable frontline fighter if she keeps improving. A harsh voice suddenly cuts through the lively tavern, mocking a useless fool for still pretending to be an adventurer. Millie freezes in horror while Kodo and Sil turn their heads toward the sudden intrusion. A battered group of adventurers steps into the light, their armor stained and scratched from a recent battle. Smirking maliciously, Ordom greets a terrified Millie while his teammate nervously begs him not to start trouble. Ordom violently mocks Millie, sneering that he expected her to die in the dungeon or work in a brothel instead of being kept by a perverted lone wolf. Ignoring Ordom's boasts about fighting on deep floors, Kodo coldly reprimands him for bringing unpurified weapons into a dining establishment. Gripping his weapon tightly, a young, battle-scarred man glares and firmly declares that he is not like Kodo. Kodo meets his gaze in silence as the man sneers, vowing he won't be some loser playing at the dungeon entrance forever. Millie and Nico stare in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the dark, unsettling emotions the young man radiates. An unsettling, heavy atmosphere instantly spreads across the once bright tavern, making the other patrons visibly uncomfortable. Noticing the tension, the young man casually apologizes for the incoming noise and tells the crowd to carry on as usual. He turns his mocking grin back to Kodo, teasingly recalling how he used to be known as the silent lone wolf. Gesturing with his spear, he interrogates Kodo about suddenly forming a party, mocking the rumor that he is just keeping a young girl around for amusement. The tavern patrons whisper among themselves, realizing that Kodo and the young man, Ordom, actually seem to know each other from the past. Ordom suddenly leans in aggressively close to a terrified Millie, barking at her and calling her a damn runt. Glaring with venomous eyes, he aggressively demands to know the truth, accusing Kodo of using her body night after night in their rundown mansion. Disgusted by the vile accusation, both girls fiercely defend Kodo, with Millie screaming that he would never do something like that. Ordom erupts into cruel laughter, mocking her admirable loyalty and sneering that she is just desperate not to be thrown away again by her master. Remaining perfectly calm, Kodo cuts through the noise, chiding Ordom for only seeing the surface of things and loving cheap gossip. His eyes narrowing with dangerous intensity, Kodo sternly warns Ordom never to insult his comrades. Infuriated by the word, Ordom scoffs in disbelief, shocked that someone like Kodo still dares to use the term comrades. Millie gazes up at Kodo's defensive back, her heart swelling with deep emotion as she softly calls his name. Leveling his weapon again, Ordom brutally brings up the past, accusing Kodo of abandoning his former comrades and being the sole survivor who ran away. The tension shatters as Ordom screams his ultimate accusation, roaring that Kodo left Fuko behind to die in the dungeon. Trembling with rage, Ordom demands to know what Kodo is playing at, spitting that his pathetic face says it all. Unable to bear it any longer, Nico angrily shouts for him to stop, desperately insisting that Fuko's death wasn't his fault. Ordom viciously orders Nico to shut up, dismissing her as a brat who has simply been clinging to Kodo since the old days. Disgusted by the display, he mocks them for playing make-believe adventurers in the shallow floors, calling Kodo a pathetic man who never grew up. Turning his back on the group, Ordom delivers his final verbal strike, declaring that Kodo has been running away both then and now. Breaking her terrified silence, Millie clenches her fists and boldly declares that Kodo will never run away. Ordom pauses his departure, glancing back over his shoulder to look at the defiant young girl standing beside her master. Tears streaming down her face, Millie bravely vows that she won't cry or run anymore, promising that they will face everything together from now on. Unimpressed by her emotional pledge, Ordom coldly compares them to a toothless lone wolf and a chirping little chick. He dismisses them as a perfect pair of losers, taunting them to take their time crawling through the dungeon since they will never accomplish anything anyway. Rejoining his own heavily armed group, Ordum states that he has finally found a real party and moved forward to gain true strength, repeating that he is nothing like Kodo. Confident in his new path, Ordum stares into the dark abyss of the ruins, absolutely certain that his team will conquer Depth 16 very soon. Clenching his hand into a tight fist, Ordum furiously declares that he will personally hunt down and kill the monster that murdered Fuko. Glaring fiercely, he snaps that survivors aren't allowed the luxury of sitting around moping, refusing to let anyone understand his pain. The scene shifts back to the guild, where Koto, Millie, and a Buster receptionist silently watch the intense exchange. Glancing over his shoulder, Ordum coldly meets Millie's worried, sympathetic gaze before continuing on his way. As the tense atmosphere clears, a random adventurer suggests to Lord Ika that they find another tavern, shrugging off the interrupted meal. Walking out of the guild, the bespectacled mage Wiki casts a concerned look at his leader and quietly mutters Ordum's name. Gripping his staff with white-knuckled determination, Ordum swears absolutely that their party will conquer Depth 16. Later, Ordum stands deep inside the dungeon alongside his current four-person party, consisting of Wiki, the swordswoman Astra, and a heavily armed warrior. Panic suddenly sets in as Wiki frantically begs the group to stop, revealing that a large-scale structural shift has completely altered the terrain. Clutching his map, Wiki explains that the dungeon is like a living organism that constantly changes, rendering their navigational information useless on the deeper levels. Unfazed by the danger, Ordum scowls at the mage and angrily accuses him of being a coward who just wants to turn back for the day. A dark flashback reveals Ordum ruthlessly discarding his old party members, calling them dead weight who only wasted his time. He proudly boasts that with Ika the Flash in their current setup, they are undeniably one of the strongest parties in the entire guild. Returning to the present, Astra argues against retreating, but the warrior warns that going any deeper after taking a beating on Depth 10 is suicide. The heated argument instantly dies when the warrior suddenly tenses, warning the party that something approaches. Wiki curses in terror as he realizes the unseen enemy bypassed their defenses by emerging from a completely unmapped tunnel. A massive, horrifying shadow falls over Wiki and Ordum, freezing them in absolute shock. A giant, mutated black hound with a jagged horn protruding from its head looms out of the darkness, bearing its massive fangs. Trembling with fear, Wiki identifies the monstrous creature as a Barghest, noting it is at least 5 times larger than normal. Stepping up to defend the group, Astra drops into a firm combat stance. The towering Barghest lunges with blinding speed, forcing Astra to desperately block its crushing jaws with her blade. Sweating under the immense pressure, Astra struggles to hold her ground against the drooling, frenzied monster. Realizing her sword isn't even scratching the beast, Astra yells for Wiki to lower its defense while the warrior points out the fatal level difference. Wiki frantically prepares a spell as Ordum calls out to Astra, ordering her to stagger the monster so they can focus their attacks. The Barghest unleashes a deafening, echoing roar, throwing Ordum off balance and forcing him to ready his spear. Just as the beast strikes, Wiki successfully casts a protective barrier, shielding the panicked party from the devastating blow. Ordum curses furiously under his breath while Astra steps forward once more to engage the towering monster. Sparks fly as Astra fiercely clashes her blade against the Barghest's fangs, fighting desperately alongside the spear-wielding warrior. Sometime later, the exhausted, battered party stumbles through a safe tunnel, panting heavily as they recover from the nightmare. Catching his breath, a stunned Ordum realizes they only managed to survive and escape because the ancient, mutated monster inexplicably passed out. A battered adventurer warns his team that going further is reckless because the dungeon's structure and monster's abilities have completely changed. He firmly declares his retreat, stating he has absolutely no intention of dying in the depths. Another teammate urges a stubborn Ordum to give up for the day, sympathizing with his frustration but insisting on a tactical withdrawal. The teammate points out that everyone except Lady Ika is completely wrecked from the grueling expedition. Bleeding and furious, Ordum curses the dungeon for rejecting them and questions how they can possibly reach their goal. Standing in the grim ruins, Ordum remains wrapped in deep memories and sorrow. Meanwhile, Shil stands quietly in a doorway, looking into the dimly lit rooms of Kodo's mansion. Shil turns to Millie and whispers that her brother Kodo seems deep in thought and is too hard to approach right now. Millie politely thanks Shil for walking her home, and Shil waves it off by saying she had just finished work anyway. She'll admits she came by because she was worried about her brother after the tavern incident, noting that he didn't actually seem that drunk. Offering a wrapped bundle of leftovers, She'll cheerfully invites Millie to eat, guessing the poor girl was too stressed to eat earlier. A mysterious voice suddenly chimes in to praise the tavern's specialty duck dishes, noting they would pair perfectly with wine. Nico casually munches on the food and lifts a bottle of wine while Shill and Millie stare in utter bewilderment. Shill loses her mind and screams at the shameless woman, while Millie panics because Nico is half naked after a bath. Recognizing the guild's receptionist, Shill demands answers while Nico casually warns Millie not to drink from the cellar without Koto's permission. Shill stammers in confusion about her brother's living arrangements as Nico playfully reveals she has been Millie's roommate for a while. Shill furiously scolds Nico, insisting that it is highly inappropriate for a guild employee to live with and favor a specific adventurer. Falling to her hands and knees, Shill cries out that she simply cannot accept this living arrangement while Nico happily continues stuffing her face. Nico smoothly changes the subject, asking about the unfortunate trouble Millie and Koto had with Ordum's party at the tavern. Millie admits she didn't realize Ordum and Koto hated each other so much, prompting Nico to explain that the two veterans have actually known each other for a long time. Shill agrees that everyone used to get along perfectly well, and Nico points out that Shill must know the full story regarding Fuko. Taking a nostalgic tone, Nico begins to recount a tale from quite a while ago when she was still a rookie receptionist. She remembers registering Koto, Ordum, and Fuko during a lively era when aspiring adventurers flocked to the guild and socialized constantly. Shill smiles and recalls how she was too young to register but often visited the lively guild where her brother's friends played with her. Nico warmly describes Fuko as a cheerful, friendly, and genuinely good person. She adds that it was completely obvious to everyone in the guild that Ordum harbored deep romantic feelings for Fuko. A bright flashback shows young Koto, Ordum, and Fuko laughing joyfully together alongside a little Shill. Nico explains that Koto and Fuko were eventually scouted to join a high-ranking adventurer party, though she isn't sure if it was for skill or party balance. Although Ordum was visibly frustrated at being left behind, Nico clarifies that he never resented Koto and instead used the moment to fuel his own competitive fire. Shill drops her gaze with a pained expression, softly admitting she still cannot believe her brother's new party met such a tragic end. Shiru solemnly reflects that the tragic report deeply shocked everyone, causing some younger adventurers to quit entirely. She explains that seeing Koto unable to act drove Ordum to desperate obsession, pushing him to get stronger solely to take revenge on the monster on floor 16. Millie listens intently as Shiru continues, detailing how Ordum constantly experimented with new party formations and healers to relentlessly push deeper into the dungeon. Slamming her hands on the table, Shiru angrily insists that Ordum's emotional struggles and resentment over hearing about Koto making new friends don't excuse him snapping at her brother. Gripping her mug tightly, she admits she understands the pain of losing Fuko, but Ordum's bitter attitude still completely ticks her off. Millie turns her head in surprise as Koto quietly approaches from behind. Looking around the tavern, he softly notes that the crowd has grown much larger. Koto calmly admits he had Ordum's anger coming, apologizing to Millie and Shiru for dragging them into the conflict. He turns to a stunned Millie, offering her a warm, genuine smile of gratitude for standing up to Ordum on his behalf. With a soft gaze, he confesses that her brave intervention helped him keep his own composure. Blushing fiercely, Millie enthusiastically declares she will always defend her teammates and promises they will keep adventuring together no matter what. Watching them share a tender moment, a visibly frustrated Shiru aggressively chugs her drink in jealous silence. Trembling with envy, she whines internally about how unfair it is that Millie gets to talk to her brother so intimately just because they share a party. Snapping out of her pout, Shiru enthusiastically suggests she could be a real teammate too, prompting Millie to innocently invite her to join their party. Shiru immediately deflates, muttering that leaving her current party isn't nearly that simple. Changing the subject, Shiru warns that before adding members, they desperately need to prepare for the deep floors, leaving Millie confused. Shiru clarifies that she isn't talking about stockpiling potions or items. Staring seriously at the little healer, she bluntly states that as things are now, Millie simply isn't qualified to enter Depth 16. The shocking revelation hangs in the air before echoing through the quiet night outside the mansion. Millie panics wildly, assuming she is disqualified because she isn't adult-sized like Shiru, completely misinterpreting the warning. Koto calmly steps in to correct her, explaining that her restriction comes down entirely to her adventurer rank. Shiru explains that unlike in the past, Strict new rules completely bar anyone below the red, upper rank from passing Depth 10. She laments that upper ranks bring annoying guild requests, noting that even Kodo avoided ranking up to stay free but will now be forced to take the test. Kodo mentions they can take the test as a party, making Millie instantly feel safe, but he cautions that they are still judged individually. Shiro firmly warns Millie that she will have to prove herself out there, admitting she barely scraped by her own red rank exam even with her teammates' help. Millie stares intensely ahead, recalling Ordum's arrogant promise to conquer Depth 16 and realizing the guild strictly tests true ability. She grimly realizes that if she fails this exam, she will hold Kodo back and completely prevent him from ever reaching the same depths as Ordum. Pushed by her devotion to Koto, Millie silently vows that she has absolutely no choice but to pass, no matter the difficulty. Stepping out into the daylight with clenched fists, a determined Millie fiercely declares she will conquer the rank-up exam. Later, Nico sits quietly reading inside the sunlit guild hall, calmly noting that today is the day of the crucial rank-up exam. Reading over an official guild document, two receptionists discuss the upcoming exam where 3 selected judges will evaluate the candidates using magical tools. They note that the deeper dungeon layers have grown significantly harder, prompting the guild to make upper rank certification much stricter to ensure adventurers truly deserve their promotions. Reviewing the updated requirements, Nico comments that the exam looks far tougher than when she took her own test. Startled to find Shiru casually reading a restricted official document, Nico wonders aloud if it might be a bit too early for Millie to take the difficult exam. Shiru points out that taking the test alongside Kodo should work in the young healer's favor, as the judges will evaluate individual contributions within the context of party teamwork. Their conversation is interrupted when Kodo and Millie arrive, prompting Shiru to silently wonder how the duo will perform since they only have each other to rely on. Bursting with energy, a beaming Millie announces they are ready to sign up for the exam and cheerfully asks the receptionist to take care of them. Watching the young girl practically vibrate with excitement, an amused Shiru silently hopes Millie does not burn herself out before the trial even begins. Suddenly, a loud slam at the guild doors completely shatters the cheerful atmosphere. A battered and completely exhausted party of adventurers drags themselves into the hall, looking utterly defeated. Recognizing the group from the morning exam session, a nervous Millie admits she is getting a terrible vibe from their miserable state. A stern, bespectacled examiner approaches the injured group, coolly acknowledging their return and praising their work on the assigned subjugation. Adjusting her glasses with an intimidating glare, the strict examiner coldly prepares to deliver their final results. Crushing their hopes in an instant, she bluntly announces that absolutely no one in the party will receive a rank up. The adventurers immediately break out into desperate protests, with one warrior selfishly claiming he contributed the most, but the examiner instantly shuts down the discussion. Ignoring the murmuring crowd, she instructs the failed party to file formal complaints if they have issues and leaves the devastated adventurers kneeling on the floor. Terrified by the ruthless display, Millie panics over the strict examiner while the bespectacled woman announces she is looking forward to the afternoon session. Trying to ease the tension, Shiru reassures them that their teamwork is far superior to the failed party and encourages them to simply stay calm. With their confidence restored, Kodo and Millie bid the receptionists farewell and head out to face their grueling trial. Deep inside the dungeon, Millie marvels at a small, winged magical device that quietly floats through the air to follow their every move. She excitedly realizes that the guild's amazing magical tool is actively broadcasting their actions back to the examiners. Warning her not to break the valuable equipment, Kodo sighs as Millie cheerfully waves at the floating camera to introduce herself. Regaining his focus, Kodo points his blade forward and declares that they need to take down a massive target looming nearby. Snapping at Millie to keep her guard up, Kodo reminds the nervous girl of the failed adventures they just saw, prompting her to snap a quick salute. Their target is revealed to be a hobgoblin, a dangerous regional boss that hits incredibly hard and annoyingly coordinates attacks with nearby goblin minions. Determined to prove their worth, Millie vows to defeat as many hobgoblins as possible before sunset to show the examiners what perfect teamwork truly looks like. Kodo firmly tells her to stick to the plan, and a deeply focused Millie confidently readies her weapon for the impending clash. As a horde of shrieking goblins charges toward them, Kodo internally notes that this is the beginning of their special operation to get Millie ranked up. Knowing that leaving the fighting to Millie would only expose her mistakes, Kodo rapidly slashes through the monsters, deciding to cover her errors to create the illusion of flawless teamwork. While Kodo ruthlessly massacres the goblin horde single-handedly, an enthusiastic Millie happily realizes their ridiculous plan of letting him do all the work while she safely heals is functioning perfectly. Kodo suggests taking a few intentional hits so the examiners tracking them will see Millie functioning well as a healer. Millie enthusiastically agrees and charges forward, while Kodo worries about the limits of their deception. Swinging her dagger with all her might, Millie strikes a goblin and lands a massive critical hit. Kodo warns her not to rush out so recklessly, reminding her that the monsters in the area will respawn soon. Remembering that hobgoblins move slower than trolls, Millie decides to use Kodo as bait for their next target. A massive hobgoblin suddenly appears and fiercely swings its heavy club directly at Kodo. Dodging the crushing blow, Kodo urgently calls out to Millie to make her move. Striking perfectly from the blind spot, Millie lands another critical hit and takes down the towering hobgoblin. Believing they have performed perfectly, the duo happily celebrates and anticipates a guaranteed rank up. Millie excitedly readies herself for the next wave of enemies, but nothing else appears in the cavern. To her absolute horror, a system notification reveals that she did not rank up at all. Millie stands completely frozen in despair while Syl watches the disappointed duo approach the guild counter. Tears welling in her eyes, Millie apologizes to Kodo, believing her failure means he cannot advance to depth 16. Kodo casually tells a bewildered Millie that missing the red rank promotion was actually entirely within his expectations. He points out the absurdity of her assuming she could skip multiple adventurer ranks in a single dungeon run. Syl kindly explains that Kodo's rapid advancement was a special case and that most adventurers climb the ranks one by one. Kodo encourages Millie to keep her fiery determination and continue aiming for the red rank in the future. Turning his attention to the guild staff, Kodo firmly states that receiving absolutely no promotion is hard to accept. A stern female examiner with glasses steps forward and asks if he has an official objection to their ruling. Two other examiners step up and agree to hear his complaints, stating it is their duty as guild officials. The female examiner presents Magitech tracking plates, confirming the staff observed the entire battle from the safety of the guild. Kodo defends Millie's performance, arguing that she executed basic healing and landed telling blows on the monsters. Syl supports his argument, noting that their two-person party succeeded where a four-person team had previously been wrecked. Kodo demands to know how the examiners could possibly find their flawless run unworthy of a simple promotion. A male examiner scoffs, claiming Millie's timid stance and sloppy swings only looked passable because Kodo carried her. He harshly mocks Millie's fighting style, questioning why a supposed healer is uselessly waving a sword around instead of casting magic. The female examiner clarifies that they postponed the promotion because Millie has almost no recorded history to support her field exam. She outright doubts that Millie was slaying monsters with a sword, assuming the girl must have been casting magic from the backline. Millie nervously tries to explain her unique technique, though she admits she doesn't fully understand it herself. The male examiner completely dismisses her, arrogantly assuming Millie just charged in while Kodo secretly finished off the monsters. The examiners murmur in disbelief as one notes she seemed to fell a monster in one blow during the exam, though another dismisses the idea as impossible for a mere fledgling healer. The lead examiner firmly states that rushing a promotion is dangerous, ultimately ruling against it because Millie still appears too inexperienced despite dealing a fatal blow. Millie stares in crushed silence as the examiner explains they cannot approve a rank up that would inevitably send her to her death by inviting far more dangerous requests. Standing beside the devastated girl, Kodo crosses his arms and bluntly declares that he is entirely unsatisfied with the ruling and intends to file a formal complaint. The tense standoff is suddenly interrupted when the examiners turn and gasp at the arrival of one of the guild's flagship high-rank adventurers, the Flashing Swordsman. A nervous examiner asks Sir Itsuka if he is here for an important request, but the legendary adventurer casually replies that he is on his day off and only came looking for a fun hunt. Itsuka turns his attention to the group, mentioning that he happened to overhear something incredibly interesting regarding a technique called critical strike. Kodo locks eyes with the towering adventurer and seriously confirms that he has personally seen the elusive skill used many times. Itsuka gazes down at a completely bewildered Millie, noting that he has only heard rumors of the skill and finds it absolutely fascinating that she might be a true user. He suddenly grabs Millie's arms to inspect them, marveling at how slight they are and finding it hard to believe they belong to a physical striker. Releasing the flustered girl, Itsuka notes that if this legendary technique truly fells foes in a single blow, he would very much like to see it with his own eyes. He casually reminds the lead examiner that during a re-exam, non-examiners are permitted to spectate the hunt as it is projected onto a screen in the hall. Itsuka points out that leaving the young healer unrated would be irresponsible, especially since examiners misjudging a candidate's true skill creates a massive problem for the guild. Admitting that even he finds her alleged abilities hard to believe, Itsuka proposes that they all gather to watch her perform in a formal re-exam. The lead examiner reluctantly agrees to the terms, confirming that filing an objection is Kodo's right and they will officially conduct the requested re-exam. She strictly warns them that a candidate gets only one re-exam and cannot test again for months regardless of the result, demanding Millie clearly show her abilities under everyone's watchful eyes. The fate of her promotion hanging in the balance, Kodo turns to his young partner and quietly asks what she wants to do. Gripping her sword with renewed determination, Millie admits she hasn't fully mastered the skill yet, but credits Kodo for finding her true potential and helping her make it work in combat. Her voice trembling with fierce loyalty, Millie declares she absolutely won't accept having their successful teamwork swept under the rug as if it never even happened. The atmosphere sours as Kodo is informed of a nasty rule dictating that the re-exam must be taken by the petitioner entirely alone, meaning Millie must dive without him. Knowing full well that Millie currently lacks the raw skill to survive a solo dive, Kodo looks at her with deep concern, only for the girl to earnestly ask if he believes in her. Millie stares up at him with unshakable resolve, asking if he will trust her to execute the technique perfectly and prove the guild's harsh assessment wrong. Her wide eyes lock onto his, shining with an intense mix of lingering fear and an absolute determination to succeed on her own. Smiling softly at her bravery, Kodo assures her that he believes in her and promises to back her all the way so everyone watching can finally witness her true strength. Out in the bustling guild hall, oblivious adventurers chat and casually check the quest boards as the atmosphere slowly begins to shift. Several adventurers notice the sudden commotion and wonder what is happening today, quickly learning from whispers that a highly unusual promotion re-exam is about to take place. The seasoned adventurers gossip among themselves, noting that making a re-exam viewable to the public is basically the guild's cruel way of messing with a candidate and serving as a strict warning to others. Despite the grim implications, the veterans encourage the rookies to watch the projection, pointing out that it is a rare and completely safe chance to see inside a live dungeon. A pessimistic adventurer sighs and refuses to watch some poor rookie potentially die on screen, cynically brushing off such a gruesome end as simply the unavoidable fate of their profession. Sitting quietly at a nearby table with a barmaid, Koto calmly listens to the cynical bystanders run their mouths, completely ignoring a tease about him acting like an overprotective mama bird. Sil brings a makeshift tavern to the guild headquarters, dodging Koto's suspicions about selling alcohol by claiming it is just apple cider. Sil serves a dried meat and nuts platter to the eager guild receptionists. The staff happily order snacks while noting that drinking is forbidden during desk duty. Wheeling her cart, Sil cheerfully defends her hustle while Koto warns her not to use Millie to make sales. Sil accurately notes that Koto is deeply worried about sending his newly acquired partner into the dungeon alone. Koto calmly explains that newbies naturally need time to train under veterans without rushing promotions. A skeptical adventurer suggests that rushing Millie will only result in watching her get beaten on the live broadcast. Refusing to doubt her, Koto firmly tells the crowd to just watch. He confidently declares his absolute belief that Millie will pull through. The receptionists look on in silent awe at his unwavering faith. A stern female examiner sits quietly, intensely observing the situation. The strict bespectacled examiner formally signals the start of the trial. As the re-exam broadcast begins, the watching adventurers scoff at sending a child healer into danger. The crowd ruthlessly bets on how quickly the young girl will drop out. Koto reveals he thoroughly drilled Millie in small party tactics because she previously lacked basic adventure planning skills. He explains he filed an objection over her previous unfair evaluation since she had already mastered the basics under his guidance. Realizing she endured Koto's Spartan training, the crowd admits the biased examiners were purely negligent. Koto declares it is finally showtime after teaching her everything he knows. Inside the dark cavern, Millie nervously experiences the isolating weight of entering a dungeon alone. A flashback reveals the re-exam requires her to subjugate hobgoblins and escape before sundown. The crowd gasps upon learning her extreme solo target is 8 hobgoblins. Seasoned adventurers immediately dismiss the heavy quota as an impossible death sentence for a lone healer. The strict examiner coldly promises to observe carefully without any personal bias. Accepting the challenge with a confident shout, Millie marches into the dungeon alongside the floating camera. She carefully navigates the terrain, remembering Koto's strict warnings to secure escape routes and avoid monster spawn zones. Proudly taking a safer detour, she smiles as she executes her plan like a true adventurer. Filled with newfound confidence, Millie vows to succeed using everything Koto taught her. She reflects on how Koto finally overcame his past trauma to form a party and aim for the 16th depth. Clenching her fists with fiery determination, Millie refuses to let her own weakness hold him back any longer. Startled by a sudden occurrence, Millie lets out a loud gasp of surprise. Stealing her resolve, the young healer adjusts her headgear and prepares for the challenge ahead. Without a moment of hesitation, she sprints directly into the gaping maw of the glowing dungeon entrance. Watching the broadcast, the guild receptionist notes that Millie appears much more mature, proving that her intense training has finally paid off. A guild member remarks that despite being a tiny, overconfident scaredy cat, Millie possesses incredible guts for daring to tackle a dungeon solo. Despite her bravery, the crowd staring at the viewing screen still fundamentally sees her as just a helpless kid. Recalling her relentless dedication to his training, Koto confidently thinks to himself that she is far from helpless and will prove everyone wrong. Having avoided partying up for so long, Koto admits he found something special in Millie that made him want to believe in her, prompting the receptionist to eagerly watch her progress. He firmly believes that she will survive this trial and permanently change how the entire world views her capabilities. Advancing deeper into the cavern, Millie grips her sword tightly and realizes she is now entering dangerous hobgoblin territory. Spotting her targets ahead, she notes a group of regular goblins guarding the path with larger hobgoblin variants lurking further back. The malicious creatures immediately notice the lone human intruder and cry out as they prepare to ambush her. Instead of panicking, the young healer locks her eyes on the monsters and fearlessly sprints forward into the fray. Evading a crude wooden club, Millie cleanly slices through the first goblin with a swift horizontal slash. Maintaining her forward momentum, she violently cleaves through a second monster, sending it flying across the cavern. She lands gracefully as the severed bodies of the goblins disintegrate into dark particles behind her. Back at the guild, the observing adventurers erupt in shock, utterly baffled that a supposed support class just effortlessly annihilated frontline enemies. While the receptionist enthusiastically cheers her on, others stare in disbelief, completely unable to comprehend the lethal technique she just executed. Smiling with quiet confidence, Millie attributes her flawless execution entirely to Koto's rigorous training. A flashback reveals Koto sternly lecturing Millie about her dangerous habit of blindly charging into battle without a plan. He questions her on enemy counterattacks, pointing out that an opponent swinging wildly leaves themselves completely open to a fatal strike. Warning her that pain and panic will freeze her during a solo run, he drills into her that the absolute basics of combat revolve around dodging and striking in a continuous cycle. Emphasizing the golden rule of survival, Koto commands her to carefully watch her opponents and never take her eyes off them. Noting that her sturdy new armor can safely deflect a goblin's raw strength even if she acts foolishly, Koto easily blocks her indignant, reactionary swing. Apologizing for teasing her, Koto reassures the flustered healer that she will be perfectly fine as long as she manages to stay calm. Returning to the present, Koto mentally notes that killing simple goblins in one hit isn't actually that impressive, while Millie readies herself for the next wave. Addressing the clueless examiners in the guild hall, Koto smirks, highly doubting that any of them actually understood the mechanics behind Millie's rapid assault. A spectator mistakenly assumes she simply used brute strength to take down two monsters in a single swing. Correcting their shallow observation, Koto points out that her weapon only grazed the second target, forcing them to question why it died at all. Staring down the arrogant examiners, Koto firmly declares that Millie's true, terrifying power is a unique ability called Critical Strike. Observing from the safety of the guild hall, the seasoned adventurers casually remark how nice it is to watch a rookie's trial from above. Scoffing at the spectacle, a cynical bystander bets that the little brat will croak but hopes she provides some entertainment before she falls. Itsuka watches silently as the crowd dismisses Millie's initial victory over some goblins just as a massive new threat emerges from the shadows. An imposing hobgoblin steps heavily into the cavern, towering over the pint-sized cleric who stands her ground with her sword drawn. Koto watches nervously, admitting to himself that he never planned on relying on Millie as a main fighter despite her critical strikes triggering far more often than expected. Analyzing the battle, Koto reasons that while a hobgoblin would normally require numerous hits to kill, Millie's guaranteed one-shots mean that even facing 8 targets won't drain her stamina too much. Shifting his focus to her technique, Kodo asks Millie if she thinks she can intentionally trigger the critical strike now that she has tried it herself. Millie enthusiastically explains that the sword flashes whenever she shouts her battle cry, leaving Kodo to guess that it might just depend on her mindset or pure luck. Deciding on a simple strategy, Kodo instructs her to focus purely on attacking more to increase the trigger chances, to which Millie enthusiastically agrees. Gripping her blade tightly and puffing her cheeks with determination, the little healer mentally prepares herself to execute the reckless plan. The chaotic melee resumes as enraged hobgoblins swing their massive wooden clubs, forcing Millie to frantically dodge their crushing blows. Debris violently explodes around her as a hobgoblin's club smashes into the stone floor right where she had been standing seconds before. Spotting a fleeting opening in the monster's defense, Millie locks her eyes on the target and readies her counterattack with a confident smirk. Taking a solid whack from a wooden club, Millie is surprised to realize that the blow barely hurts compared to Kodo's forehead flicks thanks to her protective armor. Her momentary relief vanishes instantly as the gargantuan monster rears back its heavy club for a devastating overhead strike. Bolstered by her sturdy equipment, Millie charges recklessly into the fray, determined to swing her sword repeatedly until the critical strike finally activates. Bouncing around the lumbering beast with surprising agility, the tiny cleric unleashes a relentless flurry of strikes while screaming out battle cries. The previously skeptical Peanut Gallery watches in absolute bewilderment as the little critter fearlessly dances around the monster without ever dropping her guard. Smiling with fierce pride, Koto watches the telltale spark of light gather on her blade and silently urges her to show everyone her true power. The blinding flash of energy illuminates the viewing screen, causing the stunned adventurers in the guild hall to gasp in confusion. A brilliant explosion of sheer force completely engulfs the cavern as the massive hobgoblin is struck by an unimaginable impact. While the rest of the guild erupts into chaotic murmurs trying to comprehend the spectacle, Itsuka watches in quiet awe as her suspicions are confirmed. The cavern shakes violently as the colossal hobgoblin collapses backward into a cloud of dust, utterly defeated by a single strike. Celebrating her solo victory with a joyous leap, Millie's triumphant smile falters slightly as she remembers she still has 7 more monsters left to slay. Shaking off her momentary doubt, the victorious little healer flashes a radiant double peace sign directly at the viewing crystal. The mood in the guild hall instantly shifts from mockery to genuine respect as the stunned adventurers praise the rookie for single-handedly dropping a hobgoblin. Disgusted by the examiner's lingering excuses, Itsuka sternly orders him to drop the nonsense and properly judge the girl as a capable frontliner rather than just a lucky healer. Analyzing the impossible feat, a keen-eyed observer realizes that the girl's finishing blow wasn't a product of swordsmanship but rather a legendary guaranteed strike. Recognizing the true nature of Millie's terrifying power, Itsuka recalls ancient tales of an advanced adventurer from generations ago who mastered the very same ability. Silencing the murmuring crowd with her authoritative voice, the flashing swordsman reveals that they have just witnessed the sacred power once wielded exclusively by the legendary saint. The adventurers stare at the broadcast in disbelief, questioning if saint is an actual job class and whose skill Millie just used. Kodo recalls Nico mentioning that while there are no active saints among registered adventurers, everyone would be dying to recruit Millie if she changed to that job. Nico admits she has never actually met the legendary saint herself, though rumors say she was once part of a top-rank party in this town. The guild receptionists argue that just because a little girl can use healing magic doesn't mean she is connected to a grand figure known for both offensive and defensive prowess. Despite legends exaggerating the saint's abilities to include purification and hearing the dead, one specific rumor claims she could fell monsters in a single blow using critical strikes. An adventurer scoffs in frustration, realizing that a backline saint swinging a sword finally makes sense after witnessing that exact critical strike with their own eyes. When asked if he knew about this, Kodo admits he only knew the term critical strike, but knew absolutely nothing about the actual saint. The strict examiner suddenly interrupts their break, pointing at a flustered staffer and ordering them to immediately head to the archives. The adventurers continue watching, grudgingly admitting that the brat is actually amazing for taking down a hobgoblin entirely on her own. Still skeptical, they decide to wait and see if she can even clear the re-exam before officially crowning her as saint material. Nico smiles proudly while Koto watches the screen with a look of quiet, unwavering confidence. On the broadcast, Millie stands frozen in the dungeon with a tense, determined expression. The tavern crowd suddenly jumps in shock as Millie trips and faceplants hard onto the rocky floor. Millie groans miserably on the ground, a small puff of breath escaping her lips as she recovers from the embarrassing fall. Reminding herself that she is still a total klutz who only knows the basics because Kodo kindly taught her, Millie vows not to let her guard down until the exam is over. Pausing to reflect, she acknowledges that while her old party wasn't entirely bad, they ultimately shoved her away. She recalls that Wiki was kind and Astra wasn't a bad person, but the pain of being discarded still lingers. Remembering Ordom, she realizes he wasn't always so cold from the very beginning either. Shaking her head, she firmly cuts off her nostalgic thoughts, deciding she has dwelled enough on her old party. Gripping her sword tightly, she declares that the one who truly changed her is her current party member, Kodo. Dodging a massive, sweeping club attack from her 7th hobgoblin, Millie realizes she is finally starting to figure out their weak points. She realizes the monster is pretty dumb, swinging its club wildly without understanding the massive openings its large body creates. Confidently holding her ground, she notes that luring it properly causes the beast to expose its own weak spots. With a fierce battle cry, Millie lunges forward and delivers a devastating slash directly into the hobgoblin's exposed torso. The crowd at the guild erupts in shock, amazed that she actually took down the massive beast in one hit with another critical strike. Kodo's sweat drops as Nico laughs triumphantly, urging the surrounding adventurers to take notes while pointing out that Kodo would never clumsily bump his sword into the walls. As Nico excitedly announces there is only one target left, Kodo sighs and admits he told Millie not to get cocky, but her smugness is becoming impossible to hide. Capitalizing on the excitement, Nico uses Millie's amazing performance to encourage more betting, prompting Kodo to scold her for making money off his partner. Kodo notices that not only are the surrounding adventurers starting to expect great things from Millie, but even the examiners are looking at her in a completely different light. Suddenly, someone shouts and points at the screen, interrupting Kodo's realization that Millie's evaluation will skyrocket if she safely returns before sundown. Standing her ground, Millie boldly draws her sword as a massive, crystal-studded hobgoblin towers over her in the cavern. Back at the guild, anxious spectators recognize the beast as a dangerous mutated variant and frantically question if the young healer can survive. Unfazed by the terrifying monster, Kodo confidently assures the panicked crowd that his partner will be perfectly fine. Recalling Kodo's lessons, Millie realizes the creature is an evolved monster that grew stronger by surviving undefeated for a long time. Startled by the mutated beast relentlessly charging through the tight space, she decides to lure it into a side path while reminding herself that it's still just a hobgoblin. Barely bracing herself in time, the young adventurer struggles to block a devastating, heavy-handed strike from the hulking monster. The sheer force of the monster's brutal blow knocks her primary weapon completely out of her grasp and sends it clattering across the rocky floor. Acknowledging the mutated creature's overwhelming strength, she stares down her opponent and admits that it is pretty good. Refusing to back down, the determined healer declares that she will finally go all out. Pulling out a uniquely jagged dagger, she sheepishly admits to herself that she was actually already giving it everything she had. Watching her calmly switch weapons to the blade known as Exios, the guild members debate whether the strange dagger is actually her trump card. An older adventurer recognizes the blade as merchandise from Old Man Schneider's shop and frantically warns that the weapon is definitely cursed. Dismissing Kodo's imagined frantic warnings in her head, Millie casually decides the obviously cursed weapon will be perfectly fine to use. The enraged hobgoblin roars violently and smashes its massive fist into the cavern wall right beside the dodging girl. Sweating under the immense pressure, the tiny healer bites her lip and steels her nerves for a desperate counterattack. Finding courage in the dagger Kodo helped her acquire and the protective charm from Fuda, she proudly reminds herself that she is not fighting alone. Gripping her cursed blade tightly, she channels her fierce resolve and vows that she absolutely cannot afford to lose in a place like this. Exploding into motion, the agile adventurer ducks incredibly low and dashes directly under the mutated monster's sweeping claw. Moving with blinding speed, she circles entirely behind the bewildered creature's massive, unprotected back. The observing crowd gasps in pure astonishment, completely caught off guard by the support class's incredibly swift movements. Capitalizing on the monster's confusion, Millie leaps into the air and delivers a fierce, stunning kick straight to its exposed spine. Thrown off balance by the surprise impact, the roaring beast stumbles heavily forward while violently flailing its heavy arms. As the monster crashes toward the ground, Millie positions her cursed dagger perfectly for a devastating, upward finishing blow. Unleashing a mighty battle cry, she lunges forward with all her remaining strength and plunges the blade directly into her target. Emerging totally victorious, the exhausted but proud adventurer plants her foot firmly atop the massive, vanquished, mutated hobgoblin. Catching her breath, an unsure Millie asks if she truly beat it, to which the lead examiner formally confirms she succeeded within the strict time limit. The entire guild hall erupts into roaring cheers as the veteran adventurers celebrate the tiny runt's absolutely impossible solo victory. Watching the broadcast with a soft smile, Kodo praises her hard work but quietly notes that her cursed dagger is extremely dangerous and bears watching. Meanwhile, the loud commotion inside the guild hall suddenly draws the attention of a mysterious, sharply dressed newcomer approaching from the rear. Staring blankly at the cheering mob gathered around the viewing crystal, the bewildered young man demands to know what kind of bizarre event is taking place. Approaching the guild hall, an adventurer excitedly calls out to Oldham. Startled by her sudden presence, Oldham greets Lady Itsuka, who casually remarks on the unusually lively atmosphere of the guild. Smiling knowingly, Itsuka informs him that the young girl he cannot stand is actually performing exceptionally well. Oldham stares in disbelief at the magic projector, demanding to know why it is broadcasting images of that annoying brat. Standing calmly beside him, Itsuka explains that they are watching Millie officially clear her rank-up exam. Pausing for effect, the seasoned swordswoman emphasizes that the little healer conquered the entire trial by herself. Unable to process the impossible information, Oldham merely gapes at the screen in stunned silence. Pointing accusingly, the energetic maid scolds Oldham for kicking out such a capable adventurer, gleefully recounting how Millie completely obliterated a hobgoblin with a massive flash of power. Recovering his arrogant composure, Oldham scoffs and dismisses the impressive display as nothing more than an interesting little show. Turning his back on the screen, Oldham viciously mocks Kodo for wasting his time babysitting a brat whose potential is strictly limited. Ignoring the maid's furious accusation that he relies on carrying strong people, Oldham arrogantly declares that his party is heading to untouchable depths and has no time for a rat he threw in the gutter. A heavy, silent tension hangs in the air as Koto coldly glares at his former party leaders retreating back. Disgusted by the encounter, Kodo suggests they leave the scum behind before turning his attention back to Lady Itsuka. Meanwhile, deep within the dungeon, Millie freezes as a desperate scream for help echoes through the cavernous tunnels. Blinking in sheer confusion, the little healer glances back over her shoulder toward the dark passage. A sudden system notification violently disrupts the silence, alerting her that a dangerous emergency quest has been triggered. Gasping heavily for air, a panicked adventurer stumbles up the dungeon stairs, terrified by monsters he never knew existed. Clutching his helmet in despair, the trembling man admits he abandoned his entire party because he couldn't handle the overwhelming threat. Stumbling frantically toward a bewildered Millie, the cowardly adventurer drops his pride and begs the little girl for salvation. Gripping her hilt with sudden, blazing determination, Millie silently vows to strike down whatever enemy approaches regardless of its strength. Back in the guild hall, the viewing crowd murmurs in confusion, wondering who the ordinary adventurer crashing the exam could be. Reaching a trembling hand toward the stunned girl, the man hastily apologizes before confirming that she is indeed an adventurer. Explaining that a terrifyingly strong monster scattered his party while they hunted skeletons on the lower floors, he desperately pleads for her assistance. Leaning closer to the projection screen, Koto narrows his eyes as he begins to scrutinize the cowardly interloper. Fighting off a wave of terrible memories, Millie silently recognizes his desperately familiar gear as the infamous Estina recommendation lizard set. Furiously shaking her head to deny the humiliating recognition, Millie deduces that the standard leather armor marks him as a mere rookie adventurer. The man stammers that he hoped to beg her party for backup since his comrades are still trapped below, confirming he fled all the way from the lower floors. Taking a closer look at her solitary figure, the man's face falls as he slowly realizes she has no party to call upon. Shocked to discover she is entirely alone in the middle of a strict rank-up reevaluation, the coward immediately starts backing away to avoid getting in her way. As the rookie awkwardly wishes Millie good luck and flees to find someone else, Kodo ignores the maid's assurance of success, unable to shake a terrible feeling about the sudden quest. Millie reflects on her confidence and skills after effortlessly mowing down hobgoblins all the way here while completely alone. Hearing a distant scream, Millie confidently declares she will handle the situation and rushes in as backup. Watching her detour on the broadcast, a horrified Kodo calls her an idiot while Nico looks on in confusion. Gritting his teeth, Kodo wonders if that foolish girl forgot the re-evaluation lasts until she physically exits the dungeon. The strict examiner coldly remarks that Millie clearly did not forget the rules. The guild hall falls silent as the examiners and surrounding adventurers watch the broadcasted screens intently. Millie boldly charges down a dungeon staircase to intercept a retreating, battered adventurer. After introducing herself to the exhausted Riot, he anxiously asks if she is truly sure it was okay for her to come. Putting on a brave face, Millie cheerfully claims she is totally fine while internally screaming apologies to Kodo and the examiner. Mistaking Riot for a weak newbie, Millie confidently boasts that helping out is a piece of cake for her. Sweating nervously after realizing Riot is actually a seasoned black rank veteran, Millie listens as he praises her guts for exploring the dungeon alone. Riot laments his own lack of talent despite years of effort, explaining that he just follows his far more capable leader Sheena and support Daria. Clenching her fist encouragingly, Millie tells a stunned Riot that having the guts to run back and help his party makes him truly amazing. Distant screams echo through the cavern, prompting a frantic Riot to recognize his party's voices. Riot yells out for Sheena and Daria as he spots his friends in desperate peril. Bursting onto the scene with a smug grin, Millie announces she is the backup healer while the trapped girls stare in bewildered disbelief. Riot immediately calls out a battle plan, telling his team they will attack simultaneously to create an opening and regroup. Millie watches the coordinated strike with wide eyes as the adventurers prepare their desperate offensive. Screaming with adrenaline, Riot and Sheena slash at a terrifying, massive skeleton monster from both sides. The monstrous skeleton roars in fury as the adventurers try to push it back. Surprised to learn Millie can heal, Sheena instructs her to take the injured Daria to safety while they hold the line. As Sheena vows to hold the monster off, a trembling Riot stammers in absolute awe. Millie slides over to the heavily bleeding Daria, offering to heal her while the confused girl asks for her identity. A brief moment of silence passes as Millie looks back with soft, determined eyes. Flashing a gentle, blushing smile, Millie claims she is just someone passing by. With a swift motion, Millie unleashes her radiant healing magic directly onto Daria's severe leg wound. Daria gasps in shock as she realizes her leg is completely healed. Marveling at the instant recovery, Daria manages to stand while Millie bashfully admits she has mostly been playing a power-type role lately. Daria tearfully thanks her savior, leaving Millie flustered and momentarily speechless. Their heartwarming moment is abruptly shattered by a terrified shout as Riot and Sheena are violently thrown backward. Realizing the massive skeleton warrior is far too fast and dangerous to simply outrun, one of the adventurers concludes that someone must stay behind to hold it back. Despite a teammate's desperate plea that they must all escape together, Millie bravely volunteers to act as the decoy, reasoning that she is the slowest and needs to make up for running away earlier. Flashing a bittersweet smile, Millie urges her companions to go on without her while fondly calling them a wonderful party. Her party members hesitate in anxious silence, with one calling her plan reckless and suggesting they should just fight the monster together. Making a difficult leadership decision, Sheena orders the other two adventurers to head straight for the exit while putting her full trust in the young healer. As they pull back, one of the retreating boys rationalizes their escape by noting Millie's fancy armor, versatile skills, and remarkably confident expression. A tearful Sheena silently apologizes to the brave girl, wishing her the best of luck as the party reluctantly leaves her behind. Now completely alone, Millie grips her dagger tightly as a heavy sweat breaks out across her nervously trembling face. Letting out an awkward laugh as the towering skeleton warrior approaches, Millie deeply regrets acting so cool and admits that her plan has definitely backfired. Back at the viewing screen, Kodo frustratingly mutters that the idiot girl has gotten him dragged into this mess after all. Realizing a skeleton warrior is far too much for Millie to handle alone, Kodo urgently declares he is going in to save her, much to the receptionist's shock. Before Kodo can rush off, Oldham suddenly grabs his arm to stop him. The young man bitterly tells Kodo to just abandon the party like he did before, scoffing at the ridiculous idea of Kodo suddenly playing the hero. Glaring coldly over his shoulder, Kodo immediately shuts the young man down with a sharp command to stay quiet. Releasing his grip, the young man stands in stunned silence as the veteran adventurer continues his urgent departure. Watching Kodo sprint away, the perceptive receptionist notes that both Kodo and Oldham pretend not to understand each other's feelings, even though they clearly do. She solemnly reflects on how much they have all changed, wishing they had possessed this kind of strength back in their past. Meanwhile, down in the dungeon, an exhausted Millie dodges the relentless skeleton, reassuring herself that prioritizing her party's escape was the right call despite acting on pure impulse. Hoping to somehow make it back alive, she figures she can win if she lands a critical strike, though she nervously wonders if Kodo is currently watching and feeling angry with her. Her optimistic plan is instantly shattered as the skeleton warrior unleashes a furious assault that sends her tumbling backward across the cavern floor. Cornered and battered, the desperate healer glares up at her skeletal attacker and furiously vows to fight it to the bitter end. Unleashing a fierce battle cry, Millie recklessly charges forward with the hope that smashing the boss will cause the rest of the undead to fall apart. Although she successfully severs the monster's arm, Millie stares in utter shock as the skeletal limb magically flies through the air and instantly reattaches itself. Pushed to her absolute limit, she mentally cries out that she definitely deserves a massive reward for enduring such a nightmare during a simple evaluation exam. Stealing her resolve, the brave girl tightens her grip on her dagger and decides to fully embrace the terrifying challenge. Narrowly ducking under a lethal horizontal swipe, Millie realizes she must face this trial because becoming a true adventurer is what she always wanted to do. Channeling all her power, she thrusts her glowing dagger upward and violently obliterates the upper half of the skeletal boss in a blinding explosion. Panting heavily from the exertion, a thrilled Millie celebrates finally landing another perfect critical strike. Her brief moment of triumph turns into absolute horror as the undead warrior's shattered bones quickly pull themselves back together into a fully regenerated body. Tears streaming down her face as a mysterious boot steps into view, a defeated Millie silently asks Koto if she at least did her best. Arriving just in time to save the day, Koto proudly announces his presence to the exhausted little healer. Overwhelmed with relief, Millie bursts into messy tears and screams Koto's name. He gently praises her for doing so well on her own, but warns her that the fight isn't over yet. Confused, Millie blinks as Koto suddenly tosses a small glass vial toward her. Stepping firmly between her and the imposing skeleton monster, Koto tells her he needs her to hang in there just a little longer. Millie recoils in shock at the incredibly potent taste of the otherworldly potion while Koto casually asks if it is working. Wasting no time, Koto dashes forward and forcefully clashes his sword against the massive undead creature. Watching nervously from behind, Millie tentatively asks if he is mad at her for getting into this dangerous situation. Glancing back, Koto reassures her that he wouldn't have praised her if he were angry, urging her to gather her energy so they can finish the fight and head home in triumph. Reinvigorated by his unwavering support, Millie stands up with a firm nod and tightly grips her weapon. Koto explains that while skeleton fighters use their large size and high regeneration to toy with adventurers, their actual movements and defenses are quite sloppy. He quickly outlines a strategy to prevent its regeneration, stating that they must simultaneously destroy the magic or deepen its torso and its skeletal head. Taking command, Koto instructs Millie to aim for the head the moment they finish clearing out the surrounding mob of lesser skeletons. Moving in perfect sync, the two adventurers blur into action and effortlessly slice through the scattered undead minions. Finding her opening, Millie locks eyes on the giant monster with a confident smile. Leaping into the air together, Koto and Millie unleash a devastating, synchronized double strike against the towering skeleton fighter. The cavern echoes with a horrifying shriek as their combined attack shatters the monster's skull and core simultaneously. Celebrating their hard-won victory, a jubilant Millie launches herself into Koto's arms for a massive hug. Koto groans in disgust as the crying girl aggressively rubs her tyrant's snot-streaked face against his chest while wailing his name. Clinging tightly to his shirt, she tearfully expresses her profound relief that he actually came back to save her. Looking up at him with shining eyes, Millie tells him how incredibly glad she is to be part of his party. Touched by her sincere gratitude, Koto smiles softly in the quiet aftermath of the battle. Breaking the emotional silence, Koto suggests they finally head back, prompting a loud and cheerful agreement from his exhausted partner. Exiting the dungeon into the cool night air, Millie gasps in pleasant surprise as she spots familiar faces waiting for them. Sil and Nico happily greet the returning duo, warmly welcoming their brother and Millie back from the grueling ordeal. The older girls affectionately pat Millie's head, praising her hard work while playfully noting the massive profit they made betting on her success. Back at the guild desk, the staff finally concludes the long evaluation process now that the adventurers have safely returned from the dungeon. The bespectacled receptionist sighs about the hassle of setting up the magic projector but formally thanks Millie for her late-night efforts as she prepares to deliver the results. The stern examiner officially praises her impressive battle and confirms that the required hobgoblin subjugation has been successfully completed. Beaming with absolute pride, Millie accepts her promotion as the guild officially grants her the subjugated monster's magic or as a well-earned reward. Kodo directs the examiners to the diamond-colored magic or Millie obtained from the skeleton fighter. He explains that submitting the rare drop at the counter will instantly add points toward her guild badge. The guild hall erupts in celebration as the receptionists officially approve Millie's rank up. The strict examiner notes that while rule violations like returning late are usually handled strictly, several undeniable objections were raised in Millie's favor. A male examiner sternly lectures Millie for overestimating herself against the skeleton fighter, though he admits her actions were ultimately correct. He explains that while inter-party cooperation is officially encouraged during emergencies, flawlessly executing it in a real dungeon is incredibly difficult. Smiling warmly, he praises Millie for keeping her cool under pressure and saving 3 people, declaring it an impressive feat that deserves recognition. The strict female examiner completely shatters his cool demeanor by pointing out that he initially judged Millie just because she was a healer. Blushing in profound embarrassment, the male examiner clears his throat and frantically congratulates Millie on a job well done. Stepping forward, the strict examiner concludes that although her actions fell outside the standard evaluation, they demonstrated true adventurer qualities. Delivering the final verdict on behalf of the council, she officially promotes Millie straight to diamond rank. She encourages Millie to keep pushing forward, noting that the young adventurer has clearly gained an excellent mentor. Bursting with pride, Millie smugly shows off her brand new diamond badge with an incredibly satisfied grin. Nico expresses utter shock that the confirmed critical strike allowed Millie to jump 2 whole ranks at once. Realizing she needs to reach red rank to explore below the 10th depth, Millie eagerly vows to train even harder for her next promotion. The guild staff agree that Millie's rapid growth is a testament to both her own hidden ability and Kodo's excellent instruction. They marvel at how steady and reliable she has become, completely shedding her past identity as a tiny, clueless rookie. The strict examiner quietly commends Koto, noting that he and Millie clearly have a wonderful, positive influence on each other. Suddenly, Riot and his party approach, and Millie cheerfully greets them while expressing relief that they made it out safely. Riot warmly praises Millie's amazing skills while Daria and Sheena look on with grateful, admiring smiles. Apologizing for prioritizing his own party's escape, Riot admits that teaming up with her during the crisis would have been the absolute best choice. Millie happily accepts the apology, proudly declaring that she also has the strongest party waiting for her. The 2 adventurers warmly agree to meet again in the dungeon someday, parting on excellent terms. Returning to Kodo's side, Millie confesses that seeing Riot's party in trouble deeply reminded her of her own tragic past. She reflects on how anxious and desperate she must have looked back when she was abandoned and first met Kodo. With a gentle, heartfelt smile, she recalls the profound happiness she felt when Kodo unconditionally reached out and saved her. Looking deeply into Kodo's eyes, Millie admits she wants to become just like him. Clenching her fists with newfound resolve, she declares her ultimate goal is to become an adventurer who can save people in trouble. Koto and the guild staff listen in quiet awe as they absorb the heavy, earnest weight of her declaration. Holding her hands close to her chest, Millie silently vows to continue growing stronger alongside the partner who entirely changed her life. Expressing his genuine relief, Kodo tells Millie that he is incredibly glad she was able to safely save the person in need. He emphasizes that while her desire to help is noble, he never wants her to become an adventurer who recklessly abandons others. Promising to take his advice to heart while playfully calling him her master, Millie listens as Kodo reminds her that helping others requires the strength to make it back alive. A flustered Kodo tells her to stop using that embarrassing title, but Millie happily insists that she is the disciple to his instructor. Watching them interact, a female observer notes that such a simple and pure desire to save someone is the hallmark of a true adventurer. The woman warmly smiles to herself, hoping that this noble feeling might one day bring a true saint to their land. Suddenly, a crying Cher bursts into the scene, loudly accusing them of unfairly rubbing their perfect partnership in her face. Shocking Millie with her sudden appearance, a sobbing Cher begs to join Kodo's group instead. Whining on the floor, Cher complains that she has absolutely no good memories with her own notorious party while Millie and Kodo always get along perfectly. Crying hysterically, Sher calls Kodo mean and claims she would be just as happy if he paid that kind of attention to her. Attempting to soothe the wailing girl, Millie casually invites everyone back to their house to relax and properly celebrate their recent rank-ups. Feeling deserving of a reward for all her hard work, Millie excitedly requests something sweet to eat. Instantly melting at Millie's pure kindness, Sher wipes her tears and agrees to go eat sweets together. Before they can leave, a large, menacing hand suddenly clamps down tightly onto Sher's wrist. Startling both girls, a looming figure asks where Sher thinks she is going when she is supposed to be pouring him drinks. The intimidating man claims his group had dibs on her first. He ominously adds that they have a claim on her for all eternity. A terrified Millie watches as Sher is surrounded by 3 strange, masked older men. Trembling in fear, Sher nervously mutters the name of the imposing man gripping her arm. Grisan mocks Sher for having fun with her friends while demanding she show her own party a little more friendliness. Misunderstanding the situation, Millie bravely steps forward to stop what she thinks is an old man kidnapping her friend. The 3 older adventurers pause in confusion at the tiny girl's sudden outburst. Suddenly, the masked men lean in close and stare at Millie with intense, sparkling eyes. Recognizing her from the exam broadcast, the men instantly transform into massive, squealing fanboys. The men excitedly crowd around the bewildered healer, absolutely thrilled to meet the famous Millie-chan in person. Overwhelmed by her cute appearance and casual clothes, one of the massive men dramatically tries to offer her a flower while proposing marriage. Begging for a handshake, the intense fanboys are instantly shot down when a completely disgusted Millie flatly calls them gross. The harsh rejection shatters the old men's hearts, sending one crashing against the wall in despair as Millie questions what is wrong with him. Recovering his tough guy persona while still shedding tears of rejection, Grisan reluctantly agrees to overlook Sher's absence for tonight. He strictly commands Sher to gather early the next morning for a lock-picking job, expecting her to work properly. Sweating under the heavy pressure, a nervous Sil quietly confirms her grim reality. A strange dwarf-like adventurer frantically demands Millie's autograph before his frustrated teammate drags him away by his collar. Ignoring the bizarre encounter, an energetic Sil excitedly drags Millie away to grab sweets while Kodo wonders if those weirdos are actually her teammates. Sil happily leads her friends through the evening streets while Kodo casually trails behind the bustling girls. The cheerful chime of a bell rings out as the party steps into a cozy, warmly lit cafe. Millie stares in absolute awe at a brilliantly lit display case filled with beautiful pastries. Drooling over the glass, the little cleric marvels at the sheer variety of expensive desserts magically chilled to perfection. Sil smiles gently, explaining that even rookie adventurers can afford such sweet luxuries once they start earning real money. Gesturing to the cozy interior, Sil happily recounts that her older brothers first brought her to this very shop to celebrate her own adventuring debut. A warm, motherly shopkeeper affectionately greets Sil, happily welcoming the late-night customers to relax. The shopkeeper spots Kodo with a knowing smile, prompting Sil and Nico to teasingly repeat his cute childhood nickname. A flustered Kodo quickly denies any embarrassing assumptions while the shopkeeper asks if the girls are currently part of Sil's active party. Kodo casually tells Millie to pick whatever she wants, causing the excited girl to wildly demand one of everything in the display. The cheerful shopkeeper soon arrives at their table carrying a massive tray of freshly plated cakes. Stuffing her cheeks with food, a blissfully happy Millie eagerly digs into the delicious feast. Sil watches in amusement as Millie praises the food with shining eyes before they can even formally toast. Smiling warmly, the group finally raises their mugs to properly celebrate Millie's official promotion. Sil playfully teases Kodo for having a secret sweet tooth while reminiscing about how often they visited this shop as rookies. Sil explains that the cafe was a safe, alcohol-free haven where young adventurers could simply relax under the shopkeeper's kind watch. Millie listens happily with a smear of cream on her cheek as Sil smiles warmly at the fond memories. Watching the little cleric devour her cake with absolute joy, Sil's expression softens with genuine affection. Observing Millie's pure innocence, Sil silently realizes exactly why her stern brother accepted the little healer into his party. Millie happily praises her master for the treat, while Kodo grumbles that he definitely won't be paying for her next time. Beaming with joy, Millie innocently wishes that Sil could join their party to make their adventures even more fun. Leaning forward enthusiastically, Millie pressures Kodo to recruit his sister, leaving the swordsman completely at a loss for words. Kodo sternly warns her not to take party recruitment so lightly, prompting a confused Millie to ask if switching groups is difficult. Kodo explains the harsh reality of official guild contracts, noting that Sil is likely bound by a strict agreement that prevents her from simply quitting. Nico confirms the serious nature of written guild contracts, specifically mentioning that Sil's current party operates under a binding conditional agreement. Millie suddenly shudders as she recalls the creepy, obsessive men who were bothering her earlier in the evening. A dark realization sets in as they acknowledge the infamous Blow brothers as Sil's restrictive and problematic teammates. Sil explains she is in a three-man party with the older brother Grilly, who looks like an ogre, and his younger brother Arl, who uses a great bow. Nico points out that Grilly is a problem at the reception and reminds her master that they haven't heard anything good about the brothers. Kodo mentions hearing rumors that the brothers earn money through methods outside of normal requests, though he hasn't encountered them in a dungeon to verify. Sil frantically denies doing bad work, while Millie worries Sil is being threatened. Millie notes the suspicious old guys carry red-class guild badges, assuming they wouldn't do anything bad while wearing them. Millie urges Sil to leave them and join her and her highly reliable master instead. When Millie asks why she won't join a master's party like she wanted, Sil quietly admits she can't. A female companion encourages Sil to be honest, assuring her that Kodo will listen far more seriously than before. Kodo admits he didn't want to meddle in internal party matters, but seeing their treatment of Sil leaves him deeply worried. He gently invites Sil to let it all out, hoping he can properly listen to her now. Sil confesses she held back because she thought she understood why her big brother never formed a party. She realizes her brother was always watching over her. Gripping her skirt, she declares her genuine desire to party with her brother still remains. Sil bows deeply before Koto and Millie. Sil looks up with a desperate, pleading expression. Sil begs Koto and Millie to let her join their party. She desperately asks for their help because she cannot resolve her problem alone. Sil explains that one condition for leaving her current party is a high monetary buyout, which she could theoretically earn by working hard as a tavern vendor. However, she is bound by contract to keep working as their party member until she fulfills a second condition. The second condition is to obtain a divine relic. Kodo remarks that the brothers went big with this condition, clearly planning to keep Sil trapped forever. Millie asks if a relic of the gods is amazing, while Sil admits she thought it was just a legendary treasure. A companion asks if Millie knows how dungeons were formed, explaining that made-up stories are exaggerated and such things practically don't exist. Millie correctly recalls hearing as a new adventurer that dungeons are amazing places made by the gods. The guild and the temple city teach that god Zenoa created dungeons, though their internal phenomena remain beyond human understanding. People casually attribute any mysterious existence to the gods, though saying it too casually angers Zenoa believers. In short, no one actually knows if divine relics even exist. When items with unexplained powers are found, people assume they are divine relics, but the guild cannot confirm if they are truly the work of the gods. Millie realizes the brothers asked Sil for an uncertain, unprovable item, meaning they never intended to let her leave. The companion concludes that Sil's thief skills are extremely useful to the brothers, prompting them to assign her this impossible task. Sil admits she wanted to resolve the situation but simply couldn't understand the contract's conditions. She acknowledges her own fault in agreeing to the restrictive terms. Millie expresses deep sympathy for Sil, noting the Brow brothers' malicious intent behind the contract. She then urgently asks Kodo if there is anything they can do to help. Clenching her chest, Sil firmly tells Kodo she is involved too, especially if they are aiming for depth 16 for Fuko's sake. With unwavering determination, Millie declares she wants to go with her big brother to save Sil. Kodo gazes resolutely at the girls as the group silently gathers around Sil to offer their unwavering support. Kodo proposes negotiating directly with the Brow brothers to remove Sil from their party, deeply understanding her feelings. Overjoyed by his willingness to help, Sil beams brightly and thanks her boss while the others celebrate. Millie excitedly cheers that recruiting Sil will finally make them a real three-person party capable of reaching depth 16. A cheerful woman interrupts with freshly baked pie to officially celebrate the sudden formation of their new party. Night peacefully falls over the grand estate as the group settles indoors to relax. The older woman playfully suggests Koto and Sil have another drink, revealing a good bottle brought from the cellar for the upcoming negotiation. Panicking, Sil warns Koto that letting the gorgeous booze monster live with them will only cause trouble. The older woman lovingly embraces Millie, completely ignoring Sil's frantic protests about her terrible influence on the child's upbringing. Noticing Sil's heavily intoxicated state, Millie innocently suggests she stay over instead of going home. Millie happily proposes that Sil just move in with them since they are going to be in the same party anyway. Sil stares in absolute shock at the unbelievable prospect of permanently living in her boss's house. Overwhelmed by the escalating conversation, Koto wonders aloud how they suddenly shifted to discussing people moving into his home. Cornered by Millie's noble justification about proper upbringing, Koto reluctantly agrees as long as they do not bother the neighbors. The older woman playfully squishes Millie's cheeks, leaving Sil exasperated by the chaotic excuse. Millie beams with pure excitement at the thought of everyone living together happily under one roof. Koto softly agrees, surrendering to the overwhelming joy radiating from the girls. Exhausted by the night's events, the drunken older woman passes out directly on the table. Defeated by the situation, Koto asks Millie for directions to the guest room on the second floor. Millie praises Koto's reliability as he casually promises to dump the unconscious woman into bed. Carrying the heavy blankets, Millie contentedly notes how happy Sil looked about the arrangement. Meanwhile, a thoroughly exhausted Millie washes her hair in the bath, reflecting on the chaotic rank-up exam. She shudders at the memory of the terrifyingly huge monster and wonders how many she defeated entirely on her own. Scrubbing herself with bubbles, Millie proudly marvels at her incredible growth since the timid days when she first arrived. Splashing in the warm water, she happily sighs that the soothing bath perfectly hits the spot after such an exhausting day. Resting her head against the stone edge, Millie smiles contentedly as she acknowledges how much she has truly changed. Bubbling with newfound resolve, Millie vows to never be called a useless healer again, believing she can become respectable by following Koto. Her heart flutters as she thinks of her teacher's strength, his very own house, and his incredible leap straight to blue rank. Lost in thought, she marvels at how he always rushes to her rescue when trouble strikes, admiring his cool and kind nature. A vivid montage flashes through her mind, showcasing the many breathtaking times Koto swooped in to save her from certain doom. Submerged in the warm bathwater, Millie blushes deeply as she reflects on her profound admiration for him. Overwhelmed by affection, she softly realizes that Koto is her ultimate pride and joy. Giggling happily to herself, she wobbles down the hallway with a blissful, dizzy smile radiating from her face. Startled out of her daze by Koto asking why she's staggering, she frantically blames her wobbly steps on getting dizzy from the bath. Koto gently advises her to get some proper rest for the busy day tomorrow, prompting a flustered but eager agreement. She immediately turns and dashes away at top speed, leaving Koto staring after her with a confused expression. Clutching her towel tightly, Millie beams with pure adoration, quietly reaffirming just how proud she is of her master. The next day, the trio marches through the bustling town streets, anxiously hoping the withdrawal fee they prepared will make the Blow brothers listen. Sil playfully jokes that the brothers might agree instantly if they traded Millie to them, sending the poor healer into a sudden panic. Boasting about her supposedly incredible thieving skills, Sil proudly claims she can steal absolutely anything beautifully. Dropping the smug act, Sil quickly clarifies that a thief is just a specialized adventurer job and doesn't actually mean she commits real crimes. She reminds Millie of how the guild evaluated her own natural aptitude for magic, which perfectly guided her toward becoming a healer. Emphasizing that everyone has unique talents, Sil explains that the abilities of a thief are simply natural qualities honed for adventuring. Breaking it down to its core, Sil points right at herself and reveals that a thief is fundamentally just someone with exceptionally sharp intuition. She paints a vivid picture of a dungeon, explaining how a thief can sense whether a confusing split path leads to an exit or deadly monsters. Millie's eyes go wide at the sheer usefulness of instinctively knowing exactly which perilous path is the right one. Continuing her lesson, Sil brings up a past quest for a skeleton skull to demonstrate how thieves also excel at securing rare loot. Millie recalls how frustratingly difficult that job was since defeated skeletons usually just leave behind mana and completely disappear. Sil explains that while monster drops are usually based on pure luck, a thief's uncanny intuition somehow pinpoints exactly which creature will leave an item. This uncanny ability to constantly snatch the best items from monsters is what historically earned these sharp-minded adventurers the thief title. Adding to their arsenal, Sil notes that thieves also possess the crucial instincts needed to detect hidden traps and effortlessly unlock sealed doors. Koto chimes in with a serious tone, pointing out that Sil's valuable lockpicking skill is exactly why the Blow brothers refuse to let her go. Sil shrugs off the tension, admitting she hasn't actually encountered any doors or traps in the Loriath City dungeon yet. Kodo casts a stern glance toward the horizon, warning Millie that she might witness those darker realities depending on how the upcoming negotiations play out. The imposing rooftops of the medieval city stretch out beneath the sky, silently setting the stage for their impending confrontation. Steeling themselves for the difficult conversation ahead, the trio steps through the arches of the guild building to finally face their problem. A guild member formally greets everyone as they gather for the morning meeting. Millie complains to the receptionist Nico, pointing out her hungover state despite coming in earlier. Nico assures them she has prepared the setting for their meeting with Mr. Green and the others. Koto notes the Brow brothers are already present, while Nico reassures them that the guild's guards will prevent any trouble. Nico wishes them luck, explaining she can only be present as a witness. Koto and his companion proceed toward the meeting room. Inside, the heavily armored older Brow brother sits with his mustached younger brother, waiting. Sil lets out a heavy sigh as she prepares to face them. Sil mutters that Nico had given her false hope by talking to her earlier. The older Brow brother impatiently demands they stop wasting time, scoffing at Koto and Millie. The younger brother creepily invites Millie to sit next to him, which she fiercely rejects. Koto tells Millie to ignore the younger brother, as they aren't there to entertain him. The older brother initiates the party transfer discussion, stating Sil can leave if she meets their generous conditions. Sil places her meticulously saved money on the table. The younger brother sarcastically praises her for saving so much on her tiny salary. Koto firmly confirms the money is genuinely Sil's own savings. Koto then drops a second equally large bag of coins onto the table, covering his part of the deal. The younger brother inspects the coins, confirming they are real. Koto explains that since they are pulling Sil into their party, they prepared extra compensation separate from her savings. The older brother recognizes Koto as the rumored lone wolf and acknowledges he knows his place. He admits the combined sum is a hefty amount, enough to transfer a whole party. However, the older brother coldly states that the money still isn't enough, as transfer fees don't matter to him. Sil pleads to make up for the second condition with something else, admitting they never found the divine relic together. The older brother expresses fake disappointment, claiming he thought she finally had the relic ready. He suddenly draws his weapon and presses it threateningly near Sil's face. He demands to know why she wants to leave after they have been protecting her and giving her a share. He declares that if she cannot meet the condition, she will remain their lock opener for life. Millie suddenly stands up, moving protectively in front of Sil. Millie yells at the brothers, calling them pervert old men and demanding they stay away from Sil. The older brother glares at her, while the younger brother creepily coos over her assertive attitude. Trembling with worry, the young girl stares ahead in silence as her name is gently called. Koto firmly commands Millie to stop interrupting, reminding her that he understands her feelings but they are currently in the middle of a serious negotiation. Staring down the imposing thugs, Koto acknowledges that Sil hasn't met their withdrawal condition and calmly offers a new proposal. He reveals that Sil told him about a sealed place the Brow brothers have never been able to enter, which supposedly hides a valuable divine relic. Striking a confident bargain, Koto promises to help them conquer the ruins so they can obtain the relic, under the strict condition that they release Sil. Gree scoffs at the offer, admitting they have struggled to breach that specific place but questioning how adding Koto and a tiny navigator will change anything. Unfazed by the towering warrior's intimidation tactics, Koto stares back with piercing resolve and refuses to back down. Without warning, Gree violently swings his massive blade down in a brutal surprise attack. The goggled brother simultaneously charges forward with a war cry, leaving Sil and Millie shrieking in pure terror. Reacting with lightning speed, Koto desperately shouts for the girls to get down as he blocks incoming arrows with a sturdy chair. Spinning with flawless agility, Koto masterfully deflects Gree's devastating overhead strike using only his sheathed weapon. As Sil screams for her master, Koto fiercely pushes back both brothers in a spectacular display of overwhelming defensive power. The violent clash instantly trashes the room, sending shattered equipment and broken furniture flying across the floor. Sweat drips down Gree's stunned face as he realizes the sheer, unshakable strength radiating from Koto's calm glare. With a swift and decisive upward strike, Koto completely disarms the towering brute and sends his heavy sword spinning into the ceiling. Utterly defeated and thoroughly impressed by Koto's incredible skill and guts, Gree raises his hands and yields. Sheathing his weapon, Koto offers to guide them to the special place they want to conquer, prompting a reluctant agreement from the beastly warrior. Gree formally accepts the proposal but warns that venturing into such dangerous territory will require extensive preparations. Conceding to a temporary truce, Gree tells Kodo to wait a few days for contact so they can all work together to conquer the ruins. The next morning, Kodo casually walks into the kitchen carrying a fresh basket of vegetables and greets the household. Rubbing the sleep from her eyes, a groggy Millie stumbles in alongside the older woman to mutter a tired good morning. The girls light up with surprised joy as Kodo sets down fresh water and an impressive harvest of morning vegetables. Marveling at the lush backyard garden, Sil happily notes that Kodo's amazing estate doesn't look like a typical adventurer's house at all. Looking somewhat bashful, Kodo admits he originally bought the property because he felt like he was going to settle down in this city forever. Gazing out the window toward the adventurer's cemetery, Kodo confesses he fully expected to live alone and hunt monsters for the rest of his life. Clutching her pillow with a warm smile, Sil gently reassures him that things will definitely change from now on. Staring back at his wonderful new companions, Kodo softly agrees that his lonely days might truly be over. Breaking the sentimental moment, someone casually asks Kodo to go refill the water pitcher. A peaceful silence settles over the sunlit kitchen as the group prepares to eat. Basking in the warmth of their newfound family, Kodo, Sil, and Millie share a joyful and delicious morning breakfast. Playfully teasing her guest, the older woman points out that Sil has gained a little weight since arriving. Flustered by the inappropriate comment, Sil yells at the woman while she simply laughs that eating is necessary to grow in certain places. Reflecting on the impromptu sleepover, it is casually noted that Sil ended up not going back home last night after all. Sil explains that the Brow brothers will use her abilities to confirm the location of a special place that normal adventurers cannot reach. Clenching her fist with determination, Sil begs to officially join Kodo's party after she works hard to clear this final job with the Brow brothers. Gazing at her softly, Kodo recalls that Sil had made that exact promise right before they initially parted ways. Since the contact will take a few days, Kodo suggests they head to the dungeon to train, prompting an eager Millie to agree that they must work hard. Offering Millie a steaming refill of grilled cheese on black bread, Kodo emphasizes the need to eat well since there is something he needs to check on. Her eyes sparkling at the sight of the delicious food, Millie enthusiastically declares she will eat every last bite. Later in the rocky dungeon, Kodo praises Millie for getting much better at traversing the treacherous terrain thanks to his teachings. Kodo seriously notes that while Millie has grown accustomed to delving, their upcoming strategy with the Brow brothers centers around the dangerous Depth 7. He warns a nervous Millie to mentally prepare herself, as Depth 7 is a nerve-wracking level suited only for graduated beginners. Millie confidently nods her understanding as Kodo explains they must strengthen her abilities for a special area he has never even experienced. Arriving at a rugged cavern opening, Kodo calmly announces that there should be golems lurking around the area. When Millie asks what his plan is, Kodo draws his sheathed weapon and suggests they test their theory right out in the open. Bringing up the recent promotion test, Kodo asks Millie to recall the exact moment she was knocked back and drew her short sword, Exios. Millie gasps in realization as Kodo gently asks if she felt something was off during that desperate counterattack. Looking at her inscribed blade, Millie admits she barely remembers the strike and only felt a sudden, strange compulsion to attack. Kodo notes that she acted even stranger than usual from an observer's perspective, deeply offending Millie, who questions if she is always weird. Focusing back on the weapon, Kodo reveals his suspicion that her odd behavior is directly related to the curse placed on that short sword. Millie admits she knew it was cursed upon purchase but worries that the dark magic is actively affecting both her mind and body. Right on cue, a massive rock golem heavily stomps into view, providing the perfect target for their experiment. Kodo proposes they fight the monster to see if the curse triggers again, while a nervous Millie prays nothing weird happens. Analyzing the rocky beast, Kodo explains that while he could crush it with sheer strength, its extreme hardness will be incredibly difficult for Millie to overcome. Kodo strategizes that if Millie can unleash a specific attack, the golem's formidable defense won't matter in their battle of numbers. Millie nervously asks about the golem's attacks, and Kodo calmly warns her that it hurls rocks and tries to grab adventurers. Kodo reassures the trembling girl that she is not alone, promising to completely support her before any real danger can strike. Regaining her courage, Millie observes the golem's sluggish movements compared to a hobgoblin and confidently declares they can win. Charging forward with a fierce battle cry, Millie suddenly loses control as her cursed blade wildly slashes toward Kodo. A panicked Millie shrieks in horror as her sword aggressively attacks her own master, prompting Kodo to sweat drop and admit he forgot about that treacherous effect. Kodo suggests going around to the back, while Millie nervously asks if she can hit properly using the force pulling her in. Facing the imposing stone monster, Millie steals her resolve and declares she is going in. Remembering her pre-test training, Millie readies herself to aim for the opening immediately after the enemy's attack. The massive golem lunges forward with a crushing blow, forcing Millie to swiftly dodge. Realizing a strong strike will just get deflected, she struggles to land the crucial hit against the incredibly tough armor. Adapting her strategy on the fly, she decides to strike multiple times with smaller force while repositioning alongside Kodo. Kodo watches her intensely, silently analyzing her precise movements. He reflects on how much Millie has fundamentally changed compared to the trembling girl he first met. Kodo realizes her entire combat behavior has completely transformed. Millie executes the decisive attack, but something goes wrong as the cursed short sword triggers an unexpected reaction. Although her strength and speed drastically increase, Kodo notices she has lost control entirely due to the cursed blade. Realizing it cannot be helped, Kodo quickly draws his own massive sword to intervene. Slashing forward with immense power, Kodo forces a terrified Millie to scream as he intercepts the chaos. The heavy impact sends Millie flying backward through the air with a startled yell. Landing roughly, she blinks in sheer confusion as the chaotic momentum abruptly halts. She tumbles aggressively across the ground while Kodo lands gracefully behind her. Panting heavily on her back, Millie stares up at the sky in bewildered silence. Kodo deduces she entered a rampaging state, noting the curse would be a solid enhancement if she could just maintain consciousness. Exhausted, Millie laughs nervously and admits she severely underestimated the curse's overwhelming power. Kodo reassures her they will figure out a way to use the sword eventually, perhaps by visiting a specialist to remove the curse. Looking down at her gently, Kodo sincerely praises Millie for her amazing performance. Flustered, she questions his praise, even as he notes her newfound willingness to adopt bold and reckless strategies. He marvels at how she faced her first monster fearlessly and calmly, completely shedding the girl who once cried at mere bats. Kodo acknowledges her massive growth, realizing her solo completion of the re-examination evolved her skills by leaps and bounds. Placing a supportive hand on her shoulder, he confesses that having her next to him as a companion feels incredibly reassuring. Millie's eyes widen in awe, deeply moved by Kodo's heartfelt words. A bright, genuine smile breaks across her bruised face as she radiates pure happiness. Kodo teasingly warns her not to get carried away, causing her to blush furiously and complain that his heavy praise is embarrassing. Meanwhile, near a dungeon entrance, Millie firmly turns away ordinary people, warning them that entering without being an adventurer is strictly forbidden. The rejected commoners sigh in disappointment, accepting they truly cannot bypass the rules to enter the dangerous ruins. Watching the commotion, Kodo-san decides they must rely on the Brow Brothers to navigate this situation. Millie looks up nervously, asking her master if the odd pair truly call themselves the Brow Brothers. She notes that the wealthy-looking couple seems completely unrelated to the rugged dungeon explorers. Suddenly, Syl enthusiastically waves from across the path, calling out to her favorite duo. Syl mentions she just left the dungeon and is surprised to learn Millie also explored it today. Kodo-san warmly greets the energetic girl, noting her perfect timing. Stepping up, the armored Gree announces they have pinpointed the destination and want to begin exploring early tomorrow. Taking in the fierce warrior's words, Kodo-san firmly agrees to the plan. Gree tells them no special preparations are needed, but warns Kodo-san to make sure little Millie can keep up. Before they can finish, the desperate wealthy couple suddenly calls out to Gree and Blue. Gree casually guides the pleading couple away, assuring them he will handle their ongoing matter. Syl and Millie watch the secretive exchange, completely baffled by the bizarre interaction. Kodo-san explains that the brothers likely took on another private job on the side. Syl quickly dismisses the brothers' shady business and praises the duo for their impressive dedication to the dungeon. Overwhelmed by the recent events, Millie dramatically sighs about the lingering curse of her new dagger. She realizes her unnaturally swift movements during the exam were entirely caused by the cursed item from Schneider's shop. Frustrated that she cannot control her new weapon, she decides to refrain from using the blade despite her master's recent praise. Syl playfully suggests Millie stick to her primary healer job, advising her to hold a staff and stay in the safe backline. She warns that frontline fighting is dangerous for an apprentice, especially since Gree refuses to protect allies like Kodo-san does. Millie finally understands that her combat role must change depending on her current companions. Sil explains that letting Kodo-san handle the tough enemies works perfectly, as his skills already smoothed over their recent negotiations. Pumping her fist, Millie enthusiastically accepts her role as the backline healer to put everyone at ease. With the strategy settled, Sil immediately begs Kodo-san to borrow Millie for a mysterious errand. Sil secretly plots to use this opportunity to get even closer to the adorable young healer. A short while later, Millie stands perfectly still while tightly clutching her familiar magic staff. Holding her gear, she nervously admits it has been a long time since she wore her traditional robe. Sil immediately reassures her that the magical equipment is absolutely perfect for their current task. She explains they are heading to the weapon shop for security work, making the staff and robe the most logical choice. Suddenly distracted, Sil leans in closely and asks about the beautiful new pendant resting against Millie's chest. Blushing furiously, Millie excitedly reveals her master bought them matching pendants to prevent them from getting lost. Looking down at her chest, Sil ponders the concept of matching items while recalling that Kodo's older brother had one too. Ashamed of her small chest, Sil waves off Millie's concern while secretly cursing herself for feeling envious of a younger girl. Clutching her pendant, Millie beams with pure joy, cherishing the accessory as a symbol of her companionship with Kodo. Struck by a sudden burst of inspiration, Millie excitedly suggests they all get matching items since Sil is joining the party. Softening her gaze, Sil silently observes the pure-hearted child that Kodo accepted as his loyal companion. Sil agrees to hunt for matching accessories if their next dungeon run goes well, but first points out Millie's completely worn-out rope. Flourishing her numerous daggers with practiced ease, Sil promises to show off her combat skills tomorrow as Millie watches in awe. Grateful for her survival, Millie deflects the praise while someone questions if the Loria-style combat form truly suits her. Pivoting the conversation, Sil announces she wants to adjust another piece of gear and leads them toward the craftsman's shop. The burly craftsman glares down at the group, instantly recognizing Millie as the little girl from their previous encounter. Trembling under his intimidating gaze, Millie internally panics over his scary demeanor and insists she could never wield a sword. Sil steps up to protectively request maintenance for Millie's robe and staff, expressing deep concern about venturing into Depth 7. Hearing their destination, the towering craftsman raises an eyebrow in sheer disbelief at the thought of a child entering Depth 7. Inspecting the flimsy garment, the craftsman bluntly notes that capable white-rank adventurers would never wear such an unblessed beginner's robe. Surprised, Millie asks if he knows her, to which he reveals that her recent white-rank promotion test is the talk of his customers. Bowing his head slightly, the burly man formally apologizes for his past prejudice and for severely underestimating her healing capabilities. He admits his intense hatred for half-hearted adventurers, explaining that Millie ultimately proved her undeniable commitment by picking up a sword. Sil smirks at his sudden change of tune as the craftsman firmly vows to provide proper gear to anyone serious about honing their skills. Startled by his sudden command, Millie yelps as he abruptly orders her to strip off the robe so he can begin the strengthening process. Twirling in her newly modified gear, Millie beams with delight while Sil claps her hands together in sheer admiration. The craftsman proudly declares he re-enchanted the fabric with magic protections, leaving Millie feeling like she could cast incredible spells right now. Sil excitedly inspects the gorgeous Lorius embroidery, completely shocked to discover it is woven with luxurious powdered magic ore. Panic instantly sets in as the girls realize this high-tier magical enhancement must come with a staggeringly expensive price tag. Bowing deeply in gratitude, Millie listens as the craftsman reminds them to always return for maintenance before diving into dangerous dungeons. The craftsman's expression darkens as he inspects Millie's staff, regretfully admitting that he actually cannot perform maintenance on it. Frustrated by his own limits, he reveals the staff was forged with advanced magical techniques and is shockingly high quality for a novice to hold. Handing the pristine weapon back to a bewildered Millie, he assures her it isn't broken and can easily endure the brutal depths of floor 10. With a final respectful nod, the craftsman bids them farewell and sincerely urges them to take care on their treacherous adventure. His gaze hardens into a dead serious stare as he delivers one last chilling warning for them to value their lives. Completely unfazed by the grim warning, Millie flashes a radiant smile and promises to do her absolute best out there. Kodo casually remarks he is looking forward to Millie acting as a healer, while she excitedly replies she can feel her level up. Millie enthusiastically declares she can still be highly useful even without her dagger, proudly mentioning that she even received praise for her staff. She notes that the old man praised the staff as a good item, causing Kodo to eye her suspiciously as she awkwardly admits she just somehow ended up holding it. Sil smiles gently, calling Millie an odd but undeniably charming child. Sil reflects that her impression of Millie has drastically improved, noting that most people rarely expect much from a starting healer. Sil ponders if Millie's pure potential to change things is exactly why Grilly accepted her as a companion. Sil assumes Millie must be amazing to wield such a high-quality staff, while the clueless healer simply wonders if there is something stuck on it. The joint party comes to a sudden halt on the rocky terrain as they prepare to move forward. Taking the lead, Grilly officially announces the beginning of their dungeon exploration. Grilly strictly warns the group to keep absolute silence, revealing they are about to enter a highly secretive treasure room. Arl chimes in, noting that the hidden scenery always remains completely concealed and looks like absolutely nothing is there. Grilly orders Sil to step forward and reveal the path, explaining that only a skilled thief can properly sense the entrance. Closing her eyes, Sil firmly presses her fingers to her temples to completely channel her thief skills. Millie and Kodo watch in hushed anticipation as Sil focuses her detection abilities on the solid rock face. Opening one eye, Sil confidently pinpoints the hidden entrance within the left wall. Grilly praises Sil's sharp instincts, revealing that the wall is actually part of a massive golem's body. Drawing his massive weapon, Grilly steps up to the wall and loudly declares he will handle the opening himself. With a mighty roar, Grilly unleashes a devastating strike that violently shatters the golem barrier into flying debris. Lowering his weapon, Grilly notes there is no lock on the entrance and instructs the party to step inside. The group steps through the doorway to find a treacherous path of floating square platforms stretching over a bottomless abyss. Millie gapes in absolute awe at the breathtaking underground space, stammering out her sheer shock. Arl grins greedily at the vast expanse, predicting massive treasures await them in this unprecedentedly large room. Suddenly, Grilly harshly calls out to the shorty of the group, causing Millie to flinch and point to herself in surprise. Grilly ruthlessly designates Millie as their honorable decoy for the dangerous room, sending her into an immediate panic. Grilly bluntly justifies his cruel choice by stating she clearly has the least ability, coldly warning she might get hurt. Pointing across the abyss, Grilly highlights a distant doorway and explains that reaching it is their only way out. Millie nervously peeks over the terrifying drop into the abyss below, trembling at the daunting prospect of crossing. Sil furiously objects to the cruel order, yelling that the task is far too dangerous for the young healer. Arl coldly shrugs off Sil's concerns, bluntly agreeing that falling means certain death without a single shred of remorse. Grilly casually explains they will forcefully use Millie to test which floating platforms are safe before the rest of them follow. Looking at the massive cavern structure, Sil mentions they haven't been told much about this place during their journey. Kodo-san immediately insists on getting a full explanation about the area before putting their important companions in danger. Realizing he has no other choice, Gree agrees to explain the situation as long as they keep the information strictly between them. He reveals that the entire room, from the heavy doors to the bizarre floor, was artificially constructed rather than naturally generated. Millie gasps and asks if the dungeon was created by gods, prompting Blue to laugh at her serious reaction to a simple myth. Gree explains that while deeper ruins might be the work of gods, this specific massive structure was excavated by non-human creators. He finally identifies the brilliant architects as Spriggans, a strange breed of monsters possessing an entirely different ecosystem. He describes them as squat, humanoid creatures resembling pigs that form organized groups, leaving the others completely stunned. These creatures carve out massive territories deep inside the dungeons, remaining incredibly rare for mapmakers to discover despite the scale of their homes. Looking over the edge, Millie realizes the deep holes and square rocks were all carved by golems commanded by the clever Spriggans. Gree smirks, noting that the Spriggans hoard magical ores and fallen adventurer items into guarded treasures, which his team now plans to steal. Because the grid floor is likely rigged with traps to protect the treasure, Gree commands Kodo-san to act as the vanguard decoy. Knowing traps might unleash dangerous monsters, Gree relies on Kodo-san's combat prowess while ordering Sil to use her thief senses to guide their steps. Sil nervously agrees to forge the path without knowing the exact traps, while Kodo-san promises to follow closely behind to assist Millie. To ensure her safety, Kodo-san securely ties a sturdy rope to Millie as a lifeline while the others cheer for her to do her best. Gripping her staff tightly, Millie takes a brave first step out onto the suspended stone grid while tethered to her master. Syl senses no danger on the front right square, theorizing that the Spriggans must have built a safe, correct path through the traps. Without hesitation, Millie launches herself over the dark chasm, landing nimbly on the next stone block. She lands safely on the smooth stone surface, glancing down nervously as the lifeline rope trails behind her. Breathing a massive sigh of relief, Millie smiles brightly and announces that absolutely nothing is happening on the platform. Relying on her finely tuned instincts, Syl directs Millie to jump diagonally to the left, earning an amazed compliment from the young healer. Mustering her courage, Millie leaps toward the next designated block, admitting that the precarious crossing is getting pretty scary. Suddenly, Koto-san's eyes widen in alarm as a hidden panel silently slides open within the rocky cavern wall beside them. A deadly volley of arrows violently swooshes out from the hidden trap, slicing through the air right where Millie just stood. The arrows embed deeply into the stone as a terrified Millie freezes, while Syl frantically apologizes for failing to sense the deadly trap. Sweating nervously, Syl admits her thief's intuition is based purely on gut feelings and is only accurate about 7 out of 10 times. Koto-san grimly realizes that a 70% success rate is entirely unacceptable when Millie's very life hangs in the balance. Maintaining his composure, he firmly tells Syl he is counting on her directions and promises to intercept any traps that slip through. Blue chuckles nervously from the safety of the starting ledge while a teary-eyed Millie practically begs Syl to guide her safely. Trapped out on the treacherous grid of floating stones, the frightened young healer braces herself for the terrifying path ahead. Syl praises Millie's cool-headedness as they successfully navigate a safe path through the dungeon. Encouraged by Syl's guidance, Millie maintains her focus and continues her steady progress. Syl watches silently, her gaze lingering on the younger girl with a sudden surge of protective concern. Haunted by the past, Syl fears that failing to protect Millie will cause Koto to lose yet another companion. Feeling the weight of her own perceived uselessness, Millie vows to work twice as hard to stay in the party. Steeling her nerves, Syl sharpens her focus and begs Millie to place her absolute trust in her skills. Millie responds with a bright, trusting smile as Syl prepares to tackle the next obstacle. Spotting their destination, Millie points toward the shore and declares they are almost there. Koto compliments Syl's growing accuracy, though Syl wishes she could always perform this well. Syl gives the final set of instructions, telling Millie to move forward and take a right turn. A sudden chill runs through the air as sinister eyes watch Millie from the darkness of a nearby cave. The duo stands before a series of treacherous stone pillars suspended over a deep, dark abyss. Despite sensing no immediate presence on the platform, Syl remains wary of a hidden threat. Reaching the final platform, Millie believes they have finally made it across safely. Deep within the crevices of the cave, hooded figures observe the adventurers with malicious intent. Without warning, the ground beneath Millie's feet begins to crumble and shift violently. To Syl's absolute shock, the entire platform transforms into the massive stone hand of a golem. Koto lets out a desperate scream as the stone monster lunges for the helpless Millie. Crying out for Koto, Millie flails as the platform beneath her continues to disintegrate. The golem lets out a terrifying roar, its sheer size dwarfing the small healer in its grasp. Koto dives into the fray, his face contorted with effort as he tries to reach the falling girl. Syl identifies the platform as a living trap and frantically warns Koto of the danger. Desperate to save Millie, Koto orders her to hang on as the golem threatens to crush them. Syl draws her blades in a flash, preparing to launch a tactical strike against the stone beast. Koto catches the terrified Millie mid-fall, bracing himself against the golem's relentless assault. In a moment of quick thinking, Syl throws her weapon and urges Koto to use it against the monster. Koto seizes the blade and strikes with incredible force, his attack echoing through the cavern. A heavy silence returns as Koto exhales a long sigh of relief after the battle ends. Overcome by the near-death experience, Millie breaks down in tears and admits she was terrified. Koto looks down at the sobbing girl with concern, asking if she sustained any injuries during the chaos. Arl spots a large group ahead while Grill calmly notes a magic-using Spriggan hidden among them. Koto senses a mysterious gaze as Syl sincerely apologizes for dragging him and Millie into such danger. The seasoned adventurers acknowledge that the path forward is becoming increasingly troublesome. Arl and Grill refuse to turn back, declaring that leaving without treasure would be terrible for business. Grill ruthlessly orders Millie back into the decoy role, explaining that Spriggans typically hide their stash much deeper. Koto and Millie cautiously peer through the heavy stone doors to scout the path ahead. Millie gasps in awe at the man-made chamber filled with statues, though Koto notes the complete lack of treasure. Sil clenches her jaw in frustration, sensing that this new room is likely crawling with hidden traps. Noticing her fatigue, Koto turns to Sil with genuine concern and asks if she is alright. Koto points out that Sil's non-stop use of her thief powers has clearly left her physically worn out. Millie asks if thief skills are truly that exhausting, but Sil stubbornly insists she is perfectly fine. Millie compares the drain to magic usage, while Sil admits that pushing her limits makes it feel like her life force is being siphoned. Sil explains how her abilities hit her mental and physical stamina directly, while Koto acknowledges the heavy toll of thief's instinct. Realizing the danger of Sil's exhaustion, Millie insists on using her healing magic and orders her to sit. Sil lets out a relaxed breath as she experiences the soothing warmth of Millie's healing magic for the first time. Sil admits that while her detection sharpens with focus, the aftermath leaves her completely wiped out. Driven by her desire to officially join Koto's party, Sil vows to give her absolute everything until the end. Koto and Millie share a meaningful look, deeply moved by Sil's unwavering resolve and dedication. Grilly refuses to grant any further breaks, demanding they clear the current room immediately. Sil and Millie steel themselves for the next phase of the raid as Koto stands ready beside them. Arl finds no signs of the Spriggans among the statues, deducing that they must have retreated deeper with the treasure. Grilly and Arl examine the multiple doors at the far end, certain that one leads straight to the inner sanctum. Grilly outlines the brutal plan to push to the back of the room and force open every single door they find. Millie groans in disbelief as Grilly mockingly calls her a runt and confirms she is still on bait duty. Determined to stay useful, Millie enthusiastically embraces her new nicknames as the Sacrificial Healer and Master Bait Millie. Surveying the obstacle-filled chamber, Koto calmly asks the group how they should proceed. Millie happily prepares to be tied up for her decoy role, looking exactly like a dog waiting for a walk. Koto observes the craftsmanship of the walls, noting that the entire area is constructed from dangerous golem materials. A terrified Millie imagines the horror of stepping on a trap and triggering a room full of awakening golems. Koto decides to forego the ropes and advance directly with Millie, confident he can handle any ambush that arises. Koto-san confirms the arrangement with Gree, who reminds him that handling swarming monsters is his burden to bear. Gree scoffs at the duo's cozy behavior and demands they trigger every trap to clear a path for his team. Millie and Sil whisper in disgust at the Brow brothers' no risk, all profit motto, labeling them as smug and sloppy. Sil notes that survival is the priority in a dungeon, whether through using others or genuine party cooperation. Koto-san stares into the distance, gathering his resolve before they venture further into the unknown. Reassuring the young girl, Koto-san promises that if they keep their heads, they will all make it back alive. Eager to start, Sil declares her wish to be in a permanent party with them before warning everyone to be careful. Koto-san leads the way into the corridor with Millie following closely behind, their eyes searching for threats. The architecture is startlingly man-made, making it difficult to believe they are still deep within the Loria City dungeon. Millie spots a large sculpture and asks Koto-san if it could be a statue of the god Zenoa. The group stops to marvel at the massive figure, questioning why such a relic would be placed here. Millie shrieks in terror as she triggers a hidden mechanism, causing lethal iron thorns to erupt from the statue. Koto-san scolds Millie for her careless footing while she tearfully apologizes for nearly falling into the trap. They find the discarded gear of past adventurers surrounding the statue, serving as a grim testament to the trap's lethality. Looking closer, Koto-san identifies the figure as a crude imitation of Zenoa designed to lure followers into a puncture trap. Millie insists she is fine and ready to continue, trusting in Koto-san's promise of survival. Sil senses a strange aura from another monster statue holding a box and warns the others to remain vigilant. Koto-san decides to test the statue from a safe distance, unleashing a powerful shockwave strike to shatter it. The stone sculpture crumbles instantly under the weight of the blow, sending fragments flying into the darkness. They wait with bated breath, but nothing else seems to happen in the wake of the statue's destruction. Millie breathes a sigh of relief and wonders if the box left behind is actually a treasure chest. Despite Koto-san's warning to wait, Millie eagerly moves toward the pedestal to inspect the potential loot. An ominous grinding sound fills the room as Millie realizes she has made a grave mistake. Millie shrieks in fear while Koto-san scolds her once more for touching things without thinking. Dejected from being scolded twice, Millie hangs her head while a new threat emerges from the pedestal. A swarm of giant centipedes erupts from the base, surrounding the pair as Millie screams in horror. Koto-san identifies the centipedes as poisonous bugs, shielding a panicking Millie from the crawling horde. Sil steps forward with her daggers ready, telling the group to leave these pests to her expertise. With a fierce look in her eyes, Sil prepares to cut down the swarming centipedes. Sil yells for Koto-san to dodge immediately as she prepares to wipe out the swarm in a single strike. Sil unleashes a blinding, explosive technique that tears through the cavern while Koto shields Millie from the blast. Shockwaves ripple through the air as monstrous insects are obliterated by the sheer force of Sil's onslaught. High-pitched screeches echo as the remaining creatures are crushed under falling debris and scorched by magical heat. Trembling with shock, Millie clings to Koto and stares at the flickering flames, demanding to know what Sil just did. Exhaling a puff of smoke, Sil finally lets out a long sigh of relief as the immediate threat is neutralized. Stunned by the display, Millie wonders if thieves are secretly mages while Koto thanks Sil for the heavy-duty support. Koto explains that while Sil is gifted with the fire attribute, it is a unique skill rather than traditional magic. Placing his trust in his companion, Koto reassures the young healer that Sil is an incredibly dependable ally to have at their side. Overjoyed and filled with renewed energy, Millie lets out a spirited shout as she readies herself for the path ahead. The group ventures deeper into a massive, circular chamber filled with mysterious locked doors and ancient masonry. Stepping cautiously, Koto notes they have finally reached the infamous sector known for its endless labyrinth of doorways. Nervous but hopeful, Millie whispers a plea that no more hidden traps transform into giant, murderous golems. A heavy silence fills the hall, making Koto's skin crawl as he senses a malevolent gaze watching their every move. A low, ominous rumble vibrates through the floor, prompting Millie to urge Koto to keep moving before something strikes. Both adventurers freeze in their tracks as a sudden warning echoes from above, forcing them to look toward the crumbling ceiling. The very architecture begins to fail, sending massive stone arches crashing down in a cloud of dust and debris. Acting on pure instinct, Koto lunges forward to pull Millie out of the path of a falling pillar that threatens to crush them both. Catching their breath amidst the wreckage, Koto acknowledges that even simple gravity traps can be absolutely lethal in this dungeon. To his horror, the sound of grinding stone continues, signaling that the structural collapse was only the beginning of a chain reaction. As the dust clears, Koto and Millie find themselves standing before a massive iron gate as dark shadows swirl overhead. Terrifying winged beasts descend from the rafters with a roar, leaving a panicked Millie to scream in pure terror.